to make that move sorted. You got 4 wide in the back. Look at this.
That's not going to work.
You got Jeros, you got McGrauther, you've got everyone there copping it in, and they will funnel themselves out. That is what Watkins Glen's all about. 4 wide heading into the carousel.
Styles seems to think so. He looks to the inside, coming down into Brooklands. He's got the apex, but he doesn't have the right-hander into Luffield. This is going to be tough to complete it. A nose starts to pull ahead, and does the Lamborghini have enough grunt beneath it? It's hard to say yet. Now through Woodcote, this carries on, DJ.
It carries on, and they're going to go side by side into Cops. Here they come, waiting to see who's going to make it work. It is the Porsche that's able to pull it out. A great move, but here comes the fight back. This isn't done yet for the Demon Tweaks car. They're going to try to go around the outside here of Maggots.
And Jack Styles sends it in deep, and that is going to get him into third.
Tries to set him up here down the straightaway into Tarzan.
Look at the immediate defense, but now, oh, he's a little weavy there, and he's going to have to give him the outside way deep into the corner. Lotfula somehow makes it. He wasn't quite on the apex, but that's the pass done for the 22.
It's looking very good. Simo's going to try to tuck up behind in the draft. He's going to have to really send it here down into the Firestone turn, and send it he does down to the inside. But that's going to be a little bit of a fight back there from Pablo, but Pablo has to give up the ghost.
Nobody able to make the overtake until now, as Mickey goes wide, forces himself to have to cover off the inside once again. Andy Fox trying the long way around, which is going to switch back to the inside. First change of the lead in some time as they elbow each other out of the way. And Andy Fox is your new leader. It's going to be 2 positions down. Oh no, they tangle. Mats Anderson coming together. Another little hello from Mickey. He did not like that.
The first 2 rounds of the season have been, well, a bit wild, to say the very least. After a topsy-turvy visit to Daytona International Speedway, a majority of last season's championship favorites are finding themselves having to play catch-up. Some of those drivers include handsome Pete Herod and Ross Banfield. Having a majority of the standings have been flipped upside down entering today is fairly fitting with a trip to the land down under. This is the Land Down 240, live on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 3rd race of the European region's Pro Split season at iRacing's virtual Oran Park Raceway. My name's Justin Prince. Alongside the booth for today's action is Christian Challoner and Jake Sperry. Behind the scenes is our director Zach Johnson, and he's using cameras provided by the great Dougie Beard. This action will be taking us to a facility that actually closed in the real world back in January 2010 to build a new subdivision, Oran Park Raceway. Let's learn more about this track and its history with our GSRC track guide.
Welcome to Oran Park Raceway. Though the track has been torn down and no longer exists in the real world, it was once located north of the town of Narellan, New South Wales. Thankfully, with iRacing's laser scan, it's saved for sim racing perpetuity, complete with a number of incredibly unique features. The most visibly notable of these is the fact that it was one of the few figure-8 road courses in the world. In fact, 5 of the 6 available layouts feature this crossover bridge, but most of them are decidedly short, with the longest one being a mere 1.6 miles, and the smallest barely over half a mile. You would think that this would relegate the track to simply club racing with smaller, lesser-powered vehicles. But the V8 supercars and open-wheelers with considerable grunt both competed at this place regularly. It must have been like wrangling a bull in a china shop considering the drastic elevation changes and the wickedly technical layout. Turns 1 and 2 make for a fearsome combination in which drivers are forced to brake and turn from incredibly high speeds into a tight left-hander. And the final chicane features a completely blind rise in the middle of it, making car placement almost a guessing game. The last corner also places a concrete wall all around the outside, giving it a street circuit-like feeling. The number of turns packed into such a small space makes passing difficult for just about any level of vehicle. However, mistakes can be easy to make, and most drivers will be ready to pounce should any opportunity present itself. It may have gone the way of the dodo, but rather than entering some sort of racing afterlife, fans and drivers alike can continue to enjoy this beautiful Australian track here in the virtual world.
That was a look at our GSRC track guide for Oran Park. Now, Jake, even though this track is not in operation today, it still provides some historical style racing when it comes to the iRacing service. What should drivers expect to see here today here in Australia?
Difficulty in overtaking. That is the first thing, that is the last thing, and it is everything around this place. You can see this track here, Oran Park. Now, if you go here, you'll find a very nice housing estate as you find your way around this place. But what a track it has been, and has been in terms of iRacing's housing of Australian circuits that may find themselves in a little bit of a pickle when it comes to the real world. This is a track where it's very tough to overtake these 12 turns, these 2.6 kilometers, and the places you need to try and make a pass happen are going to be down at turns 1 and 2, the sweeper into Coca-Cola, and then if you can't get it done there, you have to attack the shell corner at turn 3. Outside of that, it is very plain sailing. It is a single file track where it's very tough to make the pass, and really, you don't have too much of a long straight to get an attack. Yes, we've got V8s today, but those V8s, even with all that bulk and power, still need a lot of help to make a pass.
It's going to be very tricky to get around this circuit, to say the very least, and look at the bright side. There aren't 500 houses for sale on iRacing compared to the real world counterpart for this subdivision that now takes place here. Now let's take a look at how the points have fared out after the opening rounds of the season, and look at those numbers, because Jamie Conway, with his victory to start off the season and then a top 5 at Daytona, has him up 29 points in the pro driver standings over the winner at Daytona, Thomas Cope. Dallas Pataska rounds out the top 3. He, remember, took the victory to start off the season, his respective class. It was a multi-class race at Watkins Glen, followed by Sean Campbell, the road specialist, in 4th. Chris Barrett rounds out the top 5, entering today 92 points the separation, a massive separation of points already. Just a couple races in, to say the very least. Then for the sportsman side, those are some of the drivers racing in second split competition for today's majors action, is Garen Baden in the point spot lead, with Alexander Olsen 12 points back rather in second. Brian Broomstra is in 23 points back, third overall in the standings. Eric Reeves is 25 points back. Karam Marin rounds out the top 5 in sportsman. When it comes to the legends, and these are some of the drivers 60 and above in terms of age, David Baker leads the way in terms of drivers making full-time runs so far. Every other driver, though, only 1 start, and Mario Schroeder, Thomas Geisler, and Mark Redford. Those drivers 159 points back. The majority of the drivers looking to race in the Legends category this year are in the sports side of things. Those drivers have had a much more closer battle compared to Legends Pro, because Hakan Shant is 329 points so far scored. John Bronny, who had a strong season last year, 3 points back. Mikael Hagstrom, a notable name we've seen in pro-level action in this series in the past, in 3rd. Then it's Tommy Hellstrom and Gary Thomas, the top 5. On that note, let's take a look at the teams entering today, because one team has been a revelation entering the season. They had a strong strategy and strong teamwork-like performance at Daytona, and were very dominant in their respective car class at Watkins Glen. Jake, or rather Christian, that is Apex Tech Racing Pro, rather.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we kind of saw that all the way back at Watkins Glen. They were very, very strong, but they do only have a 35-point lead over Satellite Racing, who, you know, we haven't really actually seen that much from them except for Dallas Pataska in terms of contending for race wins and whatnot, but they picked up a lot of points. The two Grizzly TFR teams, they're actually kind of a little bit off the lead already. 230 points back for TFR Daytona, 320 points back for TFR Le Mans, and then Team Mad significantly further back. They're already 679 points off the lead in 5th spot. And now heading over to the sports teams championship. It's actually pretty close there as well. Bright Esports, they're in the lead with 1,167 points. With NRG Racing ES, they're 76 behind. HW Racing, about double that back in 3rd. And then No Emissions Motorsports, they're 233 points back in 4th. But they're actually pretty tightly contested for that 4th spot with Bright Esports by Glacial. They're 298 points off the lead, but about 65 points behind 4th spot there.
That's all top to bottom at the point standings entering today. Jake, I now turn to you because it's time to talk about the details. You mentioned today's car. It's the 2014 version of its chassis. It's going to be tricky, though, for the drivers because 2 times they'll be racing today. 2 different races to see how things fare out with our details.
Absolutely. It is 2 races today. It's round 3 of 14, but they are 2 identical 46-lap races, which is going to be very different in terms of where you start and where you finish. Race 2 gridded by the results of race 1. So you get a bad race in race 1, you've got a lot of work to do in race 2. Now, what's going to be interesting is the cars. You've got the Ford FG Falcon, and then the Holden VF Commodore. Of course, Holden no longer making supercars out there in the world today moving forward. So that's always a real shame to hear. But what you do know is that those 2 cars here in the sim, they are exactly identical. There is no margin or metric that is any different, and they have exactly the same pace. So Ford versus Holden is down to preference. You've got a 26-point incident limit for these laps. I think we will see a few of them being used here today on a track where it is very easy to dip a wheel off. And of course, you've got the T car, the spare car here today, which allows you to have that opportunity where if you do get in an accident, you do have that chance to still keep your race alive.
Got to be a challenging race either way, and challenging races, should say. It's also worth noting the reason for the Holden no longer being in real-world action. They actually had the brand retired back at the start of last year and replaced by GM Specialty Vehicles, which means importing the Chevrolet Silverado and the Chevrolet Corvette in real-world action. Meanwhile, when it comes to today, first things first, let's talk about the track conditions. We were talking about this earlier today, Christian, because it's fairly cool. It's gotten a little bit hotter since then track temperature-wise. It's 88 degrees Fahrenheit for reference. That is 31 degrees Celsius, 78 air temp Fahrenheit, 26 Celsius. Clear blue skies, beautiful day for racing here at this track here, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing to note, it's currently 10:56 a.m. sim time. So with each race being in the region of about 45-ish minutes, it's just going to get hotter as kind of the event goes on. So I think this first race, it's going to be quite difficult to make the alternate strategy, as I'm going to call it, of not actually stopping for fuel to work, just because the track temp is a little bit cool. That second race is probably going to be a bit easier. It's going to be a bit easier as well if you've kind of got the experience of saving fuel. But just for some context, it's about 3 laps short if you're going full pace to make the distance. So that's going to be interesting to see how people actually make that work, if people make that work, or if they just straight commit to doing the pit stop in the middle of the race.
Also found it interesting that the wind is very much gusting right now, as high as 17 miles per hour. That's currently blowing over top the front stretch grandstands and blowing towards the direction of turns 7 and 8 specifically right now. That's something to consider. Drivers are finishing up final practice, and before we get to the times on the board for the practice session, I can take the time to give a shout out to the charity supported by today's race, Deaf Australia, the deaf-led peak organization representing all deaf hard of hearing people and others who use Auslan, also known as Australian Sign Language, as their language of preference. Since 1986, Deaf Australia has been working with Australian governments and collaborating with key stakeholders to make sure that the nation complies with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. They, as an organization, aspire to achieve equality for deaf people across all areas of life. To learn more or to donate, go to deafaustralia.org.au. Some slipping and sliding in practice for some, as you see, but for Dallas Pataska, it shouldn't be a surprise. He is at the top of the practice charts currently, a 104.214. Sees him lead all drivers. Ross Banfield, as of late, jumped up to second, but the 104.254. Sean Campbell, Scott Brazier, Kamal Hashimi rounding out the top 5. Now, I want to turn to you, though, Jake, because of the situation with Banfield, because, as we know, Daytona was bad for him. Daytona actually made the not top 10 for iRacing for the month because of how bad it was for his first incident. That was 3 penalty points. The other 2 incidents he was a part of, 2 points apiece. He received 7 penalty points in a single round. He is 1 race point penalty point away / demerit from a 1-round ban, and that is something to keep in mind for the next 4 rounds when it comes to the 16 in sim today.
Well, he's doing better than me. I made the iRacing not top 10 twice in a row, so I don't know how well my work is doing there. But the issue that you find when you get yourself caught up in an incident is that it's very easy to compound. You think that you've done not much wrong, and you find you get an incident, and if you pick up a lot over the course of a race, it's really demoralizing, and it can be tough to go out there and say, hey, I need to drive clean. Now, it's going to be a lot of work to clear all those incidents off for 4 rounds worth of action, but what I would say is the right place to be in order to clear off some incidents and keep yourself out of trouble is at the front of the field. To keep yourself out of trouble, lead the race. You're not going to really hit anyone if you're out there in front on the very top, but being second as the checkered flag expires here in practice heading to qualifying, I'd probably say Ross Banfield right now just wants to keep his head down, just get 2 good races here out of Oran Park and just move on to the next race.
With that, it's time for 10 minutes, 4 laps of qualifying to see where drivers will be starting off. Remember, this will be setting the grid order for the first of 2 races for today with 46 laps up on the board. So I turn to you, Christian. Best way to qualify when it comes to this type of car?
Well, it's kind of a bit like driving a NASCAR Cup Series car on a road course. It's the same kind of deal. You got to really be careful not to lock up in any of the braking zones. That's pretty much what's going to get you the easiest. Obviously down at turn 3, turn 1. You know, you can ruin the lap right before you've even really got going. Yeah. So you've got to be super careful in both 1, 2, and 3 is really where a lot of the early lap time can go away. I do think that there's a little bit of tire performance to be had in maybe going a little bit slower on the outlap, but we'll just have to see if anybody's going to do that. At the moment, it doesn't look like anybody is. Dallas Pataska kind of going to be the benchmark here, and he's not doing that. But in terms of this event, qualifying is probably more important for this event than I would say realistically any other that we're going to do this year. And the reason for that is because it's so difficult to pass around here. You can be about half a second quicker than somebody else, and it's still nearly impossible to get by them. Even if you come off the last corner right tucked up underneath someone's wing, it's going to be really difficult just because of this kink here. You see it step out on Pataska there, and already this lap is gone. And, you know, that's how easily it can go wrong. So you've got to be real careful to not have a moment like that, because you do have a couple of attempts here with 4 laps, but you don't want to lose one right away, because now the next time he goes down to that corner, he's gonna have a confidence problem. You know, he's gonna probably pull it up a little bit earlier than he would like to. Then he's gonna probably try and chase the time back throughout the rest of the lap, and that's a bad way to start the event. It really is, because if you qualify badly, you're vulnerable at the start. Turn 1, turn 2, so difficult with packed field. And then you've got to think that with the race 2 grid being determined by the race 1 results, it can really go wrong right at the beginning if you don't get a good qualifying in. So this is probably the most crucial 10 minutes of the event right here.
If I may as well, just for a moment, I also want to say this is the toughest car to drive on the iRacing service because you have to deal with bucket loads of understeer, which then turns into bucket loads of oversteer. And effectively, you've got a car here which is Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely true.
Was going to say with that Jekyll and Hyde feel, I've seen drivers throughout the practice and qualifying already, you loop it in one section, but if they haven't looped it, are going 4 tire lockups to make sure they keep it on the racetrack. Just that mixture of tight and loose, it seems, as well as trying to hit those marks right to make sure you don't overcook the corner, but also don't go so slow that you're starting in 16th.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge issue for drivers here today, is finding the confidence and that level in the car where it can go out and be attacked. It's a very finicky machine, and you can see there one of the major garage cars there running off the circuit as our focus turns to the 024 machine of Chris Barrett making a move up the hill over the Yokohama Bridge and through this next right. This is one of the sections of track where you're really going to see how well a driver has got it balanced. It's a very neat line from Barrett moving forward, and you can see he's just wiggling off of the exit, trying to put the power down. This is a rear-wheel drive car. The back does want to step out, but it's definitely a car that doesn't like it when you go out there and when you push and when you be aggressive. It doesn't like it when you're going slow. It doesn't like it when you're going fast. Effectively, it's a car that doesn't like being a car. And for Dallas Pataska, who's just gone second fastest, he's short by 13 thousandths of a second, 12 thousandths by our timing up there on top. And this is the sort of track where 12 thousandths, that's the difference between putting the throttle down a half a millimeter more than maybe you did when you were being patient.
Those differences are going to be also critical at this point, with most of the drivers completing lots of their qualifying laps. I'd like to take the time real quick to remind folks that the Majors is sponsored by the Majors Garage, home of free Baseline Plus setups. Get help from any of the garage coaches 24/7. Sign up now for awesome, affordable monthly subscriptions, telemetry, coaching, and more at majorsgarage.com, or use our special discount code MajorsGSRC for 10% off. Yes, 10% off. We have a link in the description below that directly applies to said special offer. Getting back to qualifying, halfway through the session, Sean Campbell still at the top of the board. It's worth noting Sean Campbell, part of RSR, which is a very talented road course group, Christian, we've seen on the service. He's also someone in the collegiate scene who's been one of its top competitors in the collegiate iRacing league in particular, usually runs in the road course races as he goes to community college in the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, and we know he's a very capable driver, and we've seen even earlier in the season back at Watkins Glen, he was taking the fight to Pataska in his Ferrari until that unfortunate incident that happened to him on pit exit. So yeah, we know that Sean Campbell is very, very quick, and obviously currently on the pole right now. And to be honest, I don't think it matters too much as to whether you're pole or second here, because it's going to come down to how good you get that launch off the line with it being a standing start. You know, there's no... I mean, there's a physical distance advantage by being the pole sitter, but it's not as great as it would be in a rolling start, I don't feel. So I think it's probably going to come down to one strategy between Campbell, Pataska, and I'm going to put Scott Brazier in there as well, because I've noticed he's been very, very quick in practice too. I think it's between those three drivers, and Chris Barrett actually now within a 10th, so maybe joining that group. For such a difficult car, quite surprising that everybody's so tightly packed, right? But I think it's going to come down to strategy and the race start itself as to who wins this first race. And it's very difficult, you know, it's a hard car to get out of corners at the best of the time. It's even harder to get off the line.
I've seen a couple times already drivers who don't get those great launches at this type of a racetrack, albeit on the shorter configuration, taking 3-4 wide, one driver clips the grass, then you end up having calamity into the first corner. That could be dangerous here. Sean Campbell of note had an off track, that's why he's pulling off there. So the powers of Nicolas Cage not able to help him for a fourth and final time around. Now looking at one of the Apex Tech cars clip the grass and nearly crash it.
This is what we say about drivers who push a little bit too hard. That dogleg corner is so inviting to attack. You have that curve, but it just dips. And if you're in the grass on that dip, you have next to no room to make that rise through the final corner. A little bit of locking there through the final corner as we watch Ross Banfield in the 16 try and drive and improve for his lap time. He doesn't manage it, but that final corner, that final run, so easy just to take it for granted and say bye-bye lap time.
Of note, Chris Barrett, who was the driver who made that slide, immediately said, you know what, I'm going to practice my starts after that. So he's already completed his qualifying. Still 5th best. One driver who has not set a time, Theo Chalet, who talked to us after the race a little bit, mentioned how, remember, he is at Daytona running 4th gear instead of the 5th gear with that new next-gen car. Mentioned because the damage, he felt faster in the 4th gear. Right now, he's on the board now with a 105.814. Needs to go 1.4 seconds faster, Christian, have a shot at the top of the board.
Yeah, that's not going to be the lap that he would have wanted to put down because it's definitely not to the standard that he's used to. He's back there in P20 right now, which is just completely disastrous. We talked about how hard it is to pass, and that's, unless he improves on this next lap, that's really going to kind of dent any chance he's got of a good points finish this afternoon.
The only driver not yet to set a time, two rather, are Elvis Benello and Adam Fasciponti. Everyone else has set a time on the board. Mark Redford, a 106.2, is the bottom of the pylon currently. Chalet, the only drivers out qualified by him so far, Henderson, Cordell Cologne. We'll see where the time is this time. Final minute on the session. He actually grazed the wall. That man, the lap, yes it does. That's an incident point for him. So that's the end of qualifying for the 14. As look at the top of the board, yes.
Brazier, 104.415, 9 thousandths of a second to snatch pole position in the final minute. And how important is that going to be? And we talk about this being a tough track. That final corner, you've got a wall, that's a 0x. Doesn't matter how many instants it is, 0, 1, 2, or 4. You invalidate the lap, you invalidate it. What a lap by 555.
And Pataska can't match, Campbell can't match. The only driver who can have a chance to match at this point is Trevor Bobrovsky. Mark Redford is also keeping going. And yes, you mentioned Bobrovsky out of laps. Redford, he's out of laps too. So qualifying is complete. And Scott Brazier is able to rip away the pole time to be able to jump to the top of the board in the final 15 seconds. He'll be the one who will start on the front row here today and bring them to the green flag with Sean Campbell second. Dallas Pataska, Chris Barrett third and fourth. Banfield and Conway fifth and sixth. Butterwich and Hashimi round out the top 8. And Tolman will start alongside Trevor Bobrovsky to round out the top 10 for the start.
Moving back then to 11th, 999, and Miguel Freitas finds himself there alongside Joshua Wolf. Following that, you've got Hanson Pete Harrod there in 13th, and Ryan Wasilewski in 14th. He's followed by Ryan Walker and Julien Gion there in 16th position. Thomas Cope and Gabriel Roos, 17th and 18th. David H. Baker, the leader of the Legends category, has Theo Schleret for company on row 10.
And Travis Henderson and Cordell Cologne line up on the last full timed row there, 21st and 22nd. Mark Redford, the last driver to set an actual time of 106.209 there in 23rd. And then we've got Elvis Bonello and Adam Fasciponti rounding out the tail end of the field.
Real quickly, ask you this, Christian. Keys to victory for today, 51 seconds. Drivers have to get on the grid.
The start, obviously we've already been through qualifying. That would have been my first one. The next one is the start. And then after that, turn 1 and 2 on the first lap. Make sure you survive. And then finally, strategy. That's what it is, I feel, today.
30 seconds to go. Jake, based on your experience with these types of cars, your favorites to win this?
I'd probably look for someone to try and win this on a fuel save, and I think my money's going to be on 23, Dallas Pataska. I think he's got what it takes.
Most of the drivers are on the starting grid, just waiting for the final driver. And we do have said driver to be able to get ourselves going. Engines are revving. Engines are fired. The Sandown 240, race 1 is underway from Oran Park. And a great start for Sean Campbell. He tries to make the pass for the race lead already, 3 wide behind him. Pataska watches in the wings as Campbell keeps the preferred line into the first corner. Brazier tries to slide as a crash behind. Everyone's off. Everyone misses the corner.
Brazier off, that's the big one. Contact as they went in through 1 and 2 is not good. Still some 3 wide. Melnarovic then sees a little bit of contact between the 2 cars there. Conway there involved in it as well. Sorry, Vavroski. So everybody in a little bit of trouble in the early stages. This is the most critical phase of the race. 2 are clear. It's Campbell and Pataska. Banfield has a huge gap there in 3rd, and suddenly the mid-pack continues. Look at this. They've got to try and stream to find single file.
What a first lap, to say the very least. The pole sitter, Scott Brazier, I should say, having a massive incident, sees him second to last on the opening lap. Handsome Pete has just gone in single file. Everything's calmed down for the most part now, but what a mistake to make, Christian, on the opening lap, in the opening hard braking zone, and you just cook it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing. You've got no reference points at all, and a real hero to zero type moment right there. Obviously, we saw Battyman qualifying, snatching the pole the last 30 seconds of the session. Well, all that's for naught because he's basically last.
So that means Sean Campbell, you see here with Dallas Pataska, the top 2, they've broken away by 1.3 seconds already. And Pataska doesn't look like he wants to wait here. He's looking quick. It's just a matter, though, of where does he try and get this run? Remember the saving. This could help him a bit if he elects to stay behind with the fuel save strat.
Yeah, and this is where you just got to be alert, because you don't have to make the move, you don't have to be aggressive. This is one of the cards as well, I'd say, because this is such a heavy gas-guzzling fuel tank, that if you do lift and coast around this circuit, you're going to gain so much in terms of an advantage. Look at him right up underneath, coming out of the final corner. He'll have a little half chance, but he's not going out there, not being aggressive. Defensive line taken by Campbell, and I think if you can lift and coast 100 meters around this circuit, you can save yourself easily a lap. These are V8 engines, and they use an almighty amount of fuel around this track.
Of note, Ross Banfield, fastest lap so far. He pushed by a full 10 to try and get back up to this grouping. It's fairly safe to say Ross Banfield, he and that llama are not saving right now.
I'd certainly agree at this point. I don't see the way that he brings himself back in unless Sean Campbell's pace starts to wane in this one. 105.4. He was quicker of the 3, though, last time by. So he's definitely got something there that he wants to join that group. And the moment that llama joins the back of that group, he's also in the sit and wait and be patient game. This is a game of undercutting. And it is worth noting about as well that if drivers do choose to come in and pit, the pit entrance is not only A, single file, but B, right on the racing line. So it is going to be maybe a little concerning today to watch drivers entering the pits.
And the reason you say that, even with the white line, mind you, drivers are utilizing a bit of that runoff space down the front straightaway coming out of Ricardo corner to be able to exit. And then that barrier, Christian, that Jake's referring to is, I don't even call it a car length wide. It's more like 9/10 wide.
Yeah, it's an unforgiving pit entry, to say the least. It's pretty evil, if we're being completely honest about it. So yeah, I think if anybody is going to commit to the one-stop strategy, then they've got to be really, really careful on pit entry because, as you say, it's kind of on the racing line for 1, and 2, it's sort of in an acceleration zone anyway. So it's actually really, really difficult to get it figured out in terms of getting it stopped for the cone, and not just stopped for the cone, but actually navigated it around the barrier. And Pataska looks pretty close here, but I just don't see the ability to make a pass into turn 1 unless Sean Campbell makes a mistake.
Out of curiosity, one of the team representatives for U-Dogs, Unorthodox Motorsports, their response to the thought of saving fuel here to go for a no-stop. What's fuel saving? Jamie Conway trying to save his car from the grass. He just comes back onto the circuit coming out of turn 2. Jamie Conway was 4th to start the lap.
and he just locked it up going into the corner, just carried a little too much. It was the smallest grab of gravel, and he's lost himself not just one position, he's lost himself about a half dozen out there on track. So Jamie Conway in all sorts of trouble, and we talk about the fine margins around this circuit. You could break the same place each time, 3 different times, you get 3 different things, and there is one of the Ford Falcons then that's gone around, and there's a second driver in trouble going through on what is the old kart circuit.
That's Mark Redford involved in this one. Elvis Bonello was the other driver involved. That was involving one driver clipping the sand. Mark Redford, he bounced off 2 different drivers after overrunning the corner and having the wheel at a full 180. 3 wide as mentioned, yes.
Pavlovsky, Wasilewski, Homan, all there in towards 1. This is going to end in tears. They funnel out to 2, and look at this, Homan trying to work it around the outside. If he just had enough traction, he had the inside line for turn 3. It all funnels back out to single file, but that was very much bravery needed from those 3 drivers.
And Christian, that's where the give and take is so critical too. If you enter that corner 3 wide, and you involve yourself in an incident, guess who gets yelled at if you are third person who shoves it in?
Yeah, absolutely. And right there, it looked like it all kind of started with Vavrovsky getting a really poor run off the last corner. And it was only 2 wide for a while until Wasilewski decided he was going to take the opportunity to make the move as well. So I think, yeah, if there's ever a moment where a driver makes a slight mistake coming onto the front stretch, you've just got to punish him for it, because it's so difficult to kind of get a natural opportunity to make a pass. It's one of the Team Mad cars there in the background having a huge slide out of the last corner, but doesn't look like anybody was there to capitalize.
Yeah, that's in the group involving Handsome Pete. Freitas has mentioned also in that respective pack right now, with the sandwich being Joshua Wolf there. A little bit of a tire lockup from one of the satellite racing machines in Gabriel Ruse, but for the most part, Handsome Pete just keeping himself here. He struggled a little bit in practice, Jake, especially when it came to entry. He's backed up his corners since then to make sure he doesn't make the mistakes he was doing in that session.
Absolutely, and you know, you're going to see it a lot over the course of a stint as we see one driver in the background in trouble. That's one of the cars. That's Thomas Cope, the winner last time out at Daytona, struggling but coming back up and under Cordell Cologne on that short run in towards the left, or the right and the left. So a nice little move back, but this is a tough track. You really are going to find out what your tires are made of. There is no real time except the front stretch where those tires get what is known as a rest. And if they get a rest, if they get an opportunity just to sit, that's where it's okay. These tires are going to get a lot of work, especially the rears out here today. The rears are going to be the ones that are sliding about. And if you can keep the car as straight as possible today, you are going to give yourself maybe 10 to 20% more tire life than your opponents. And that's going to be a huge difference maker.
What a recovery, though, for the 555, though. Braziera has moved his way inside the top 15 grouping just about already. He's 17th now after putting himself behind the 8-ball by about 22 seconds with his lockup and slide off the racetrack that sent him second to last. He's one of the quickest drivers on the racetrack as well. 106s in traffic.
And those 106s in traffic, you know, that's going to be the tough thing, traffic. Today, I think, Christian, you've got a better eye on this as a driver than a lot of people. We know it's a tough place to pass, but if you're patient enough, you can get through. But it is going to cost you, what, about at least a second and a half at a time trying to make your way through?
Yeah, it's normally about that, and actually you picked up on the point of that I was just about to make, that okay, he's running very quickly now, but he's about to catch the back of this trail of cars, which are all kind of stacked up. So
one's off in front.
One of them going off. This is going to be a big incident on exit.
Stayed at the side. That's Holman in the T3 Motorsport machine. Bit of a dangerous rejoin as he cuts it hard right to stay out of the track. My goodness, that could have been worse than what it was there.
It was such...
Sorry, Jake, I was just going to say, whilst that was happening, we've got, I think it was Conway's made his way back past Vavrovsky.
He has as well, and that was well done. So that was making the run up towards turn number 3. He just launched that in from about 3 miles back and caught Vavrovsky napping on the outside. He had nowhere to go into 4, and that is Conway just taking advantage of what is a very important braking zone.
Speaking of braking zone, Brazier dived his way underneath Chalet and passed by like he was standing still into Ricardo Corner up in front. Miguel Freitas, known for his ability on road courses on the iRacing service for the past few years, wanted to make a pass, thought better of it, to the inside Joshua Wolf, that time through the sweeper.
Very, very tough braking zone into 1 and 2. This car does not like turning and braking under any circumstances. What do you get yourself at Oran Park? Probably the most notorious example of turning and braking, Justin. It is a nightmare, as just behind Brazier, that is Julien Gion trying to get past Theo Schleret up the hill, and through they go in the front of shot.
Got to move right on by indeed as we look back towards that grouping still with Wolf. And now it gets interesting for the Simsa esports driver, Christian, because we talked a little bit about that pace, that frustration that may build in. He's really attacking these corners hard. It's going to be difficult to try and make sure you do it cleanly at the same time, because you don't want to say, oh, I'm the pole sitter, let me on through, please, for nothing. These drivers will fight for the spots for points here.
Yeah, they totally will, and I think it'll be a little bit easier for, say, this first pass on the Team Madcar, because they're at the tail end of the line. You know, they're not really fighting for anything. Then there's a big wiggle on exit, nearly had them both off right there, but well, apparently he is going to fight the position. But my point there was that there's not really a lot to be lost in letting one car past, but as you get into the middle of this line, it becomes much, much more difficult, because, you know, as soon as you open the door, then everybody's going to pile in.
That's just a solid move, and Justin, I do want to just point ourselves back up to the front of the field. Dallas Pataska is looking really, really racy here today. He wants to find a way past Sean Campbell, take some laps at the front of this field. Every time into 1, he looks close, but the RSR esports car has had it covered every stage of the way.
Yeah, right there in particular is a big difference. Campbell lifted off the gas there, noticed about 10-20 feet earlier, a bit of that fuel save possibly as the lead car coming into play, compared to what Pataska is able to do. Compare that as well to Banfield, who closed in that gap to be in this pack, who hasn't really been too much saving-wise so far to stay in this grouping. So 3 different approaches here, Christian, from these 3 drivers, whether you're the lead driver trying to save, the middle driver trying to save, or the driver in the back who says, you know what, I want to push.
Yeah, can I just add something to that? I don't think Pataska's trying to save, as we see another one on the satellite cars has gone for a loop there in the karting section of the circuit. But I don't think Pataska's trying to save. I was chatting to him pre-race, and I think he was pretty committed to making a one-stop strategy. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually did go with that, or he is trying to make it on no stops. But Banfield's looking really strong. I was honestly expecting to see Banfield drop off a little bit, but he really hasn't. If anything, he's closed the gap to the lead pair.
I find it interesting about the wanting to push part. I know one of the main things mentioned too by Majors Garage postings were they thought the one stop would work. The thing is, again, the pit delta. You have to consider that as well with how much time it would take to fuel the car, Jake. How long will that be, in your opinion, delta-wise, here at this racetrack with this car type?
Depends how someone's in the That's not a nice place at turn 1. And that is what we call disaster. And if that's who I think it is who's found the wall, it is. It's Scott Brazier. That is what happens when you start pushing too hard. He was just on the wrong side. Tried to get cheeky around the outside of Josh Wolf. Dipped a tyre in the gravel, had a wiggle, and then fought actually in sympathy at the same time. Miguel Freitas followed him off.
He was locking it up before he even got to this. Straight away for the entry. And yeah, there it is right there. Freitas at the same time, right behind him, made a similar mistake and just overcooked his corner.
Well, here's the thing as well. You get a locked rear axle very quickly in these cars. What you'd normally see from a race car is if you brake, you still get that revolution in the wheel. If you put too much of the brake on this car, you're not just going to lock up one wheel, you're going to lock up two. And if you lock up both of the back wheels, you are drastically bringing down the ability to steer the car. So that's always going to be a huge concern. And that's why we have seen a few places dropped again from Brazier with that incident in towards turn number 1.
That's the unfortunate thing. It's been clear he has the pace, but it's not been clear that he's had the composure in the midst of pressure, it seems, today. He's now 22nd on the racetrack. Up at the front again. Campbell's starting to stretch things up pace-wise. Keep in mind the fall-off compared to their fastest laps. Only about 4/10 so far, Christian. So not too much fall-off over the course of 14, 15 laps so far. Keep in mind, we're hearing reports that there are some of the drivers up front using some clutches at times here.
Yeah, so that's definitely an indication that they're trying to save. But to come back to the tire point, Jake mentioned it earlier that you can save a lot of rear tire just by being much kinder on the throttle. But the other crucial thing is to avoid front lockups, because it's that sliding of a locked tire that really is massively detrimental to wear life. So if drivers are going to try and make this without a stop, as we see a car having an incident on the front stretch, right at pit entry there.
That's Cordell Cologne that has some massive damage, and that was from 19th. He had already lost. Yeah, he already lost his right front fender. Just snapped it, Jake.
No, it's a huge spin. He caught a tank slapper out the final corner. One of the Team Mad cars off. That's Handsome Pete Harrod in trouble there as he is off the road. Looks like there's not much damage on the car, so he's okay. But the issue for Cologne was he caught a tank slapper, nosed it in, then tailed it in. He lost the entirety of the boot.
Yeah, that is unbelievable. But I want to turn towards that Handsome Pete situation, because I noticed on the timing pylon that he had an incident coming out of turn 3 that lost him a bit of time. This is the incident mentioning that lost him the back end when it comes to Cordell Cologne. But when you mention Handsome Pete, this is where this whole entire spurring of cars we just seen trigger. Goes off the track, kicks some dirt up from the right side. Looks fine, right? Side by side, a couple more corners. And then we get to about crazy time. Bye-bye.
This is what happens when you push and you just go a little bit too wide. And, you know, I mean, Christian, look, you got here on this iRacing service. You can run actually the karting circuits around this place as Harrod's in the pits. But at the same time, wouldn't you say that because it is so narrow down that back section of track, you have to give a little bit more room than that?
Yeah, I would, and it's brought up something interesting that was actually causing me some trouble last night, is that most drivers are used to left-hand drive cars, and this is a right-hand drive car, so it's different in terms of references to your track edge that you're used to, and if you don't remember that, you end up with a situation like that where your left sides are unknown to you. They're actually off in the gravel until you kind of get to a point where you need that grip and you turn in, and it's totally not there. So this section in particular is very, very easy to do that. Just really unfortunate for Pete there that he was kind of all on his own and trying to do his own thing and taken out by somebody else having the big moment.
Looking at the lead group of note, Handsome Pete did elect to come down and take his stop at that point, and this is going to be something to indicate. 9.1 seconds was the time he had interval-wise, including potentially using the faster pair, and he has the toe of the race lead pack. That is about, when you consider things, where things can cycle, 40 seconds once you're on for that respective service. So that's going to be something I think drivers will have to consider, where if they have to pit, such as Elvis Pinello just hit from the lap traffic, that will be a lot of time that they'd have to make up in the course of about half or a third of the race, Jake. That's the risk. Campbell's been trying to save the fuel. He's been the one clutching.
Yeah, and this is the thing. You don't want to spend any unnecessary time down on the lane if you can manage it. There is that big trade-off, though, as well with the tyres, because what I would suggest if you're going for that stop is you come in, you change the tyres, you got fresh tyres to go and attack. Those tyres are probably going to be at their level best for maybe 5 to 10 laps. You can get 5 to 10 laps on fresh tyres when these tyres are just going to get worse and worse, and then, you know, you're going to be closer to the rims every time that you're going along. then there is that huge advantage at pitting a little bit earlier and trying to run yourself back through the field. The one issue I think drivers are going to be having today is if they are saving the fuel, they're also going to have to be saving tires. And this is where you're going to have that huge trade-off on the more that you slide, the more you're going to need the throttle to bring the car back, the more fuel you're going to be burning over the course of a race.
And that's something people seem to not realize at times. Like, I'll be honest, I do a lot of saving myself in a lot of the races lately in stock car racing with some of the cautions that can come out there. And here's the thing, when you go out of the save mode, you start to try push once you realize I'm gonna fuel, you go for a normal lap, oh wait a minute, I'm about to plow into the wall now. My tires are ballooned to the size of a beach ball, Christian.
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of get out of that mindset after you've been saving for a very long time. It's the easiest is actually kind of immediately after a pit stop, which obviously in this case, if you're saving, you're not going to want to do that. So it is difficult. And this is genuinely a challenge to just make the 46 laps, both on fuel and tires, let alone in a racing situation. So I won't be at all surprised if we see some drivers within the last 10 laps kind of just bail out of it, come in for a splash and dash. I think at that point, if you're out of tires, you're really, really in trouble. But you know, it's kind of a risk in either direction, because you can commit to the one stop, which is safe in the sense of you don't need to save. You don't need to save at all, really. You don't need to save fuel or tires. But the pit loss is massive. I'm pretty convinced that a zero stop is the way to go if you can make it happen. It's just challenging to do that.
Looking at some of our camera views for today's action, the previous one you've seen was Theo Gillet. This is Thomas Cope, who is very calm in his setup for today for Olympus. He's had an eventful couple moments, had an eventful victory last time out, now has an eventful dive to the inside by two different drivers looking for spots. Freitas and Brazier are passing right on by. He just lets them go.
Wise decision. Save the race. Don't bother for fighting with people around this track. This is a car that you do not drive, it drives you. And as such, you've got some drivers who are going to want to try and wrangle the neck of this car. You're going to get other drivers as well. As actually into the pits comes Dallas Pataska from second position. We've got strategy here. Lap 20, the call to come in.
Well, this is interesting. And Christian, you mentioned him wanting to push aggressively. Well, he's taking the risk of going in for the pit stop as well before halfway. Remember, the fall off right now for some drivers is about 0.7 of a second. So if, in theory, depending on how things fare out, once the tires equalize out, he may have a bit of time, but not much time to close this up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because obviously you've got a lot of cars going past now, and this is where the undercut is kind of alluring, not from a raw performance point of view, but more from a who am I racing point of view. Now, the strategy here is really that he's banking on that he's going to be much faster than Sean Campbell, and that Campbell is either not going to pit and he's going to catch him at the end, or when Campbell pits, Pataska's kind of outlap and laps in between. Big lock up into turn one on new tires. Not how you want to start that one, but as we see another driver coming into pits, is that Banfield?
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
And this is big right now, Justin, because these drivers are trying to work out where do they need to be in terms of their stops. And I think a lot of drivers are thinking, well, if we can't make this work on strategy, we may as well half and half it. Another satellite car coming in, the 14 of Wasilewski, who'd got all the way up to about 7th position in this race. So a lot of the top 10 thinking, well, this was a one-stop from the beginning. We're going to get our fuel save, go in, get our fuel, get our tires, and get ourselves back out. It is interesting to note as well how drivers are going to try and put enough fuel in the car so they can mitigate it while the tire change is going on.
Oh, big difference for Ross Banfield in fuel compared to Dallas Pataska. Pataska went for a 23-second stop. Banfield went for 16 seconds. Banfield has jumped Pataska in the pit window by 7 seconds, Jake.
And the worst thing as well is that Pataska is balled up behind Mark Redford for 20th position right now. This is a huge loss at the moment as he now has to try and figure out the way to get through. He'll look down the inside at turn 3. It will be side by side off the exit, but he does get the move done. But this is what we're talking about. If you pit early, you still have to fight cars for position, and it is going to cost you time, as we said before, about 1.5 seconds per pass.
So it's going to get really intriguing to see if the fuel numbers those drivers put in are right, if Banfield's got enough gas, if Pataska had enough gas to start off the run with the lighter fuel, if he chose that mark, because that is something you can adjust, believe Christian, is how much you start off the race in fuel tank-wise.
Yeah, and that's where I'm wondering what the difference between them is, whether Pataska started with just inherently less fuel, but I would have thought that they would have kind of had it figured out so that you would fill up as much as kind of the tires took, you know. So it is interesting that there's such a difference there between Banfield and Pataska, and I'm almost wondering if Banfield took tires. I'm not sure if he would have.
He was on the jacks, but I'll ask this, and Jake, you would know this more on this, Mark. In terms of said tires, they're essentially are they changed like 2 at a time or 4 at a time, to clarify?
It's 2 at a time in this series. Oh, it's a big wreck as we go through.
Oh!
And that is in the barriers. And that is Wasilewski, who had just come out of the pits.
Unreal, as Wasilewski absolutely demolished. What happened here as he rejoins in front of a whole entire pack?
Oh, that was weird. That was so weird. He just he was trying to avoid Mark Redford, who had just spun in front of him. So Redford goes around, and you're going to see this here. He loses the back end. He puts it hard into the tires. He's trying to get that return back out onto the circuit, and here's going to come Wasilewski in the forefront of your screen as he tries to reverse back out, and you're going to watch this. Oh, which way do I go? He moves right, and he just tags the wall there.
Oh my gosh. That was the worst possible place I think you can get stuck there, Christian. And that's where you feel bad for Mark Redford, but at the same time, that was the worst possible way to try and rejoin in that worst possible place to rejoin.
Yeah, I think that's one of the...
Another one off.
Yeah, one of the Team Mad cars, Miguel Freitas, has gone off there, and he's now under threat for that position as he rejoins the circuit. But yeah, in terms of that kind of incident, when you've kind of gone off and you've ended up in a situation where you're having to do like 3-point turn to get back on track, sometimes you really should just tow. I know it's painful to do it, but if you're broadside in the middle of the track and you're going to have to reverse, you just got to tow.
Getting clarification and confirmation, Ross Banfield did take tires on that surface. They didn't say how many of them, so that's important to note. But Sean Campbell, as we talked about, expecting to go the distance here, possibly on the fuel if he can do so. Others who are still going and trying to save, Chris Barrett in second. He's 11 seconds back, however. Jamie Conway's in third, but with damage, he's actually lost a few seconds, but did pass by Kamal Hashimi a while ago. Joshua Wolf, he's still on track in 20th. Ryan Walker in 6th. Chalet's in 7th. Ruse, Cope, and Brazier rounds out the top 10, who is on the Yahtzee strategy, I guess you can call it, where you're just trying to gain as much time as possible after you've gone off the track twice and just want to pass cars in every spot, including the areas you normally don't.
Yeah, that one then is a nice pass. That will be to, in terms of this moment in time, put himself a lap back ahead, I would say, at this point in time. He's just trying to make sure he's gaining place on place on place. You're going to see these different strategies come into play, and this is going to be the difference between tires and no tires and how drivers are going to be going out there and dealing with this sort of scenario. I'm pretty sure there'll be some drivers trying to save, some drivers trying to make this all work. I'm looking at times right now. Look at Sean Campbell. He's doing 106.2s. Dallas Pataska, by comparison, 105.4s. He's 0.8 of a second a lap quicker. Ross Banfield, 0.9 of a second a lap quicker at this point in time. His car goes off turn 1.
And it's Ryan Walker. And the commentator able to keep it going, though. A bit of a slide, though, because he also cooked the corner. And that Moranis E-Stars assisted group not going to be happy as several of their drivers have made that mistake today, Christian.
Yeah, and really turn 2 has kind of been the place where we've seen the majority of the big mistakes, I think it's fair to say. Just drivers overcooking that braking zone, and it's really easy to do, but also the most costly mistake that you can pretty much make on the track. Now, looking at Sean Campbell, we're talking about the 0.8 of a second faster for Pataska, but right now he's 45 seconds behind. So he's going to need to be a lot quicker than that to catch up to Campbell with 20 to go, on the assumption that Campbell isn't going to pit.
The reason I'm laughing there is, look at that mirror to your right upper hand corner of your screen, where we mentioned the face on that helmet. Look at the text on behind. If he can't make it on gas, that will be his reaction likely.
Yeah, no, I can't argue against that, but Sean Campbell here and those very well-defined eyebrows that you can see in the mirror, he definitely wants to make sure it's not the bees that he is running away from right now. He is running away from the likes of Ross Banfield and co. And the likes of Ross Banfield is still going to have to pass drivers. He's got David H. Baker just in front of him. It's 38 seconds to chase. And he, on that last lap, was 1.3 seconds quicker than David H. Baker. So it's all about finding the right time and the right place. And Sean Campbell does know this is going to be a very, very sticky situation late on. He lost 2/10 on that last lap to a 106.4. There was another 106.4 this time by as Cordell Cologne's just coming to the pits again.
And keep in mind, this is an important race for some who may be racing later today, Christian, in particular in the Americas region, where they might be taking notes and trying to say and see, will this work? Will that work? How do I drive this track? What is Christian saying? What is Christian saying? What is Christian saying? What is Jake saying? What is Christian saying? You know what I mean.
They shouldn't listen to me. I don't know anything about a car, apparently.
Well, I wouldn't kind of put that on yourself right in the public space there, Jake. That's rather harsh, I think. But, yeah, no, I mean, I'm watching this both as a commentator and also as kind of my own research, if I'm totally honest. Definitely watching what Campbell's doing right now, watching what Pataska's doing, seeing if there is any real advantage to this one-stop strategy. To be honest, I don't think there is. I don't see how Pataska's going to account for what was essentially 45 seconds in just over 20 laps. And with how hard it is to pass, I mean, we've seen with Brazier, when he's trying to get back through the field, it's really, really difficult. It kind of sort of brings out even more mistakes when you're having to push hard to pass cars. I just feel like it's asking a lot to make that one-stop strategy work. You're going to have to run the entire race at 100%, and even then it might not be enough. I'd prefer the strategy of just saving and being able to cruise a bit and just knowing that it's going to be on everybody else to pass you rather than kind of you to pass them.
So 17 laps to go, currently coming towards 16 to go. For reference, Banfield still 36 seconds to catch to Campbell if he wants a shot here. Realistically, you're not making up 36 seconds unless there's some mistakes building up. Here's the thing, too. Pete Herrod's also hanging around, and Sean Campbell's actually ripping in traffic here. Those couple things may potentially be factors in what may help and hurt him here, Jake.
What's interesting to see who has stayed out, it is all of the Apex cars then. So Barrett, Conway, Schleray, they've all stayed out. Kamal Hashmi, you can put in there as well, has stayed out. Thomas Cope is still out there at the moment. And then it's Ross Banfield in 7th position. So I think only a handful of drivers, and when I say a handful, I mean a handful plus one, they have said, right, we're going to try and make this go all the way to the end. It's such a slow lane through here. It's only about 42 kilometers an hour as you transit down the lane. It feels like agony in comparison to what you're racing around this track.
That's 31 miles an hour for reference for those watching from the Americas regions. But yeah, that is essentially a school zone speed for context as well. But as these drivers come to 15 laps to go here, the intriguing thing also to keep in mind is who has that track position to make that no-stop work in the first place. Cope, he's about to get reeled in by Ross Banfield in the next couple of laps, Christian. Chalet may get reeled in. Hashimi is borderline with Conway. Barrett and Campbell have the best track position to be able to, if they can get to the end, hold on to at least a podium.
Yeah, I feel like top 3 is safe from anyone who has pit, providing that they can, make it to the end without one, running out of fuel, and 2, dropping off the cliff in terms of tire performance. I think Schleret is kind of borderline. I think it's going to come down to how fast Banfield can pass Cope. And we've seen Cope hasn't really been fighting people, so we'll just have to keep an eye on it in case he starts to fight the guys who've stopped now. But I do think that the strategy of the Apex guys has really made the difference here, because they had some, I don't want to say mistakes, but, moments towards the beginning of the race. And obviously Chalet started back in 20th after the disastrous qualifying. This will be a huge result for him if he can pull this off.
Absolutely. And I know for that respective group, it's been a stellar week. We'll get to that in a second as we see Thomas Cope now having within 1 second Ross Banfield on the fresher rubber. Last time by, 1.3 seconds quicker was the 16 car in sim. Just nowhere to go quite yet to make this run on the Olympus machine. And there it is.
Exactly. You get a little bit of a run off of the exit. Cope's been probably one of the more generous drivers out there in the field and hasn't necessarily made things a tough battle. And as much as that wants to be fought, you're on different strategies with different tyre levels, and you're just going to have to let that go and just try and hold on. That's going to be the difficulty of this race, and this is the bit that hurts drivers who start a little bit further down in the field, make their way up through. This is the bit where you start losing the spots, and this is the bit as a driver that's the demoralizing part. Yes, you'll get a good result, but you won't like it if you, say, for example, find the barriers if you're Josh Wolf in the Grizzly TFR car.
Joshua Wolf too strong once again into turn 2. Actually clipped the grass in through that first corner before slamming under the brakes and locked the entire left side tire all the way into the tire barrier. So Wolf drops down to 14th because of that respective incident. But to get back towards that mark point, mind you, these are going to be some great points hauls for some of these drivers. Campbell needed some good points to close on in to the championship lead. Barrett's had a very successful start for the most part when he's kept himself clean. Conway's been consistent to start off the season, Christian. Hashimi, this is one of his best runs of the campaign so far to the 3 rounds. He did well at Watkins Glen before this. So a lot of stellar runs for those inside the top 4 right now, making this strategy work and are looking to be on that line for it.
Yeah, I think for Campbell, this will go a long way to, offsetting that non-finish, so to speak, at Watkins Glen that he had. But for Barrett and Conway, this is really huge. They obviously had very, very good finishes at Watkins and pretty decent finishes at Daytona as well. So this is going to help them out a lot in points, and especially for the Apex Tech team too. To have three cars in the top 4 with three drivers score points per each team. So it doesn't really get any better than that unless something magical happens to Campbell and they end up with a 1 through 3. But it's kind of really been a strategy play by that team as a whole, and so far it looks like it's really, really working out.
And the reason I wanted to discuss that group in particular when it comes to Apex Tech is we talked about their experience over to the ranks. One of their works drivers is Jan Turnjak Hart, who runs in Slovenian karting championships, international championships as well, FIA Central European Zone. He's been a medalist in that side. Ended up winning his first race of the season in the Slovenian KZ2 karting championship. So a lot of talent is coming through that respective group and that pipeline, not just when it comes to the virtual world, but the real world as well with some of their connections.
Yeah, and you really do see it. This sim racing can be a really good tool for drivers to get better at the real world. And we see it time and again, and I think the real world really wants to try and harness that potential of what sim racing can be, and see drivers push and see drivers work on simulator time and getting better and using those skills moving forward. That would be one of their real success stories on what sim racing has become over the last 3 to 5 years. You're looking, though, at what this is, an in-sim competition. This is some really good in-sim competition that's going on right now as we focus on Jamie Conway making his run forward. Conway's times, 106.5 that last time by. Hashimi matching him every stage of the way. They're all pretty much in the 106s at this point in time. And it's showing here that those 106 times, when they're getting right down to it, they've reached a very nice plateau with the tires right now here, Justin. So I think this is probably the level it's going to probably stay at until pretty much the tires really do decide they want to fall off.
I'm really going to be watching with intriguingness on all these cars, I will say, all campaign, knowing the talent levels they have across the platform. We've seen it in this series. We've seen it in endurance competitions as of late over the past few months, in the league scene in particular. They have drivers who have experienced the Latvian Pro Kart Championship level as well. That's shown some speed. You also think about some of those who are based from the United States, who race more on the roadside on iRacing, who have experience at the NX Legend Car Series level and have worked on the spotter stands. They have a lot of talent to give Apex Tech a lot of credit as a respective group. Spin for Mark Redford. He's now saved it as we continue on to the final 10 laps, down to 9 laps to go this time for Sean Campbell. And Christian looking nice and calm at this point, we'll say, when it comes to that 7 machine. He's kept it rolling and has grown the gap by 3-4 seconds to some, especially with some of the others battling like this.
Yeah, and I mean, you can kind of say that it's looked pretty easy for him, but I mean, it didn't at the beginning of the race, you know, when he had both Banfield and Pataska right with him. But I gotta feel like he had pace in hand, and he knew he had pace in hand even at that point. Obviously, he's going for the no-stopper, probably, well, must have been on a full tank of fuel. You could probably assume that Banfield and Pataska weren't at that point. So I gotta think that Campbell kind of, in either situation, probably had the measure of those two that were with him. But it's just worked out really nice for him. He's had a very, very calm race. As soon as those two pit, he's been out on his own, really just logging laps, probably shooting for his fuel number, trying to make sure he doesn't burn out either front or rear tires. And that's about as good as it gets, really, in terms of how a race can go for you. So really can't say enough about how he's just executed it perfectly. The only thing he didn't get was the pole.
And even then, if he's able to make this work, guess who starts the pole race too? Campbell. Because remember, the grid for the second race of the day is set via the running order at the line for race 1. On some of the battles still heating up, this is Gabriel Ruse, along with Gene on. Joanne John Reich, I should say, with Joshua Wolf, as there goes an Apex Tech car. Bye-bye, Apex Tech car. As he rejoins track. Yeah, it's been a rough one for him.
Well, that one is pretty much the gimme pass for Ross Banfield, and that will make his life a little easier. Dallas Pataska's as well, because they haven't really had to fight for it. And in the middle of all of that passing going on, that is Melnarovic, who has just lost the position to Pataska. So the 88 of Melnarovic now behind Dallas Pataska, who absolutely will have the bit between his teeth, over-fueling at the stop, and now having license to be aggressive.
Horrific race, to say the least, for the 13 as we look at some of the other battles on track. Dallas Pataska currently still in the 8th position. And he is still second on his net strategy here, but he's still 3 seconds back of Ross Banfield, currently on the circuit with lap traffic separating them at the moment. Banfield just played this perfectly, I think, Christian, to be able to get himself in this spot with this advantage. Yes, it's tighter on the gas, but he's been able to make it work in terms of making the time stick.
Yeah, so this gap's about half what it was kind of at the pit stop time between Banfield and Pataska. So obviously it has come down. You see Banfield seems to be struggling a ton with front locking right now. He's going to have to be careful of that with only 7 to go. But it's going to be difficult, you know, for Pataska to get this pass done on Banfield, even if he gets there. Just mentioning on Schleray, obviously he had that off at turn 1, but you know, I feel like he's still going to be happy with kind of the recovery, you know. It started back in 20th. It's still inside the top 10. Providing there's no more mistakes, he's still going to finish there. And that's I feel like that's a job well done, even with that mistake in turn 1 that we just saw.
Still inside the top 8, this strategy helping him propel himself up the running order by at least 5-6 spots at minimum. After struggling in qualifying, as we've seen with the contact coming to his final lap's conclusion along the front stretch wall. About 5 laps to go, coming up this time by for Sean Campbell. And some of the drivers who are going to be thinking, what if? You can put the 555 at the top of that list, Jake. He is 18th after being the pole sitter for race 1. Just has not been able to recover at all for any proper ground with multiple incidents since then. As you see Campbell.
Absolutely. Campbell then is going to let that one go to Miguel Freitas, who will gain his lap back, and wise decision there from him. Just let it go. You're not racing him. You're racing against the clock with a 17-second margin at the front of the field. The issue with what's been going on for 555 behind, it happened at turn 2 on the opening lap of the race. Had the lead, got it into the corner, couldn't manage to bring it back. So that's definitely an issue out there. And so if Brazier wants to try and do better than what he's done here today in race 1, he's going to have to make places early in that race 2, because as we both know, the order of how you finish in race 1 determines the grid for race 2. There's going to be a lot of work to be done in race 2 for a number of drivers who started high up the order.
Just about 4 laps to go this time around now. Campbell getting a little bit of space. Of note, some of the drivers who have been the biggest movers, as mentioned, Chalet. You have David Baker, who's also on the stretching strategy, who's really slowing the pace down, I've noticed, to try and make that work. He's the last of the drivers not yet to pit so far. You also have amongst the big movers, in part with strategy calls here, in part with some recoveries, Gabriel Ruse in 12. You also, at the same time, have a lot who've lost spots. Hanson Pete -5 a lap down. We mentioned Holman from his incident, 1 lap down in 20th. You mentioned as well at the 555, 17 lap position spot. It's lost. 555 has actually gained the spot past Hanson Pete after some lockups. Just the nature of how the race can play sometimes if you don't hit your marks early on, and you said it yourself, Christian. Your keys to victory. Nail the first laps. Get into a rhythm. Guess what? Most people didn't nail that first lap, didn't get into a rhythm. They ended up playing a song in their head when it was a completely different one on the note sheets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of came down to get a good qualifying lap in, get a good race start, survive turn 1 without losing any spots, and you were pretty much set for a good result. You know, I mean, obviously there was still the strategy aspect of, do you do a 1-stop, do you do a no-stop? I think it's very, very clear now that no-stop is the way to go, and we're going to see everybody move to that in the second race. I feel like if you don't move to that, then that's a catastrophic mistake. You're essentially making the decision to finish in the back half of the field, which I wouldn't personally understand. So I think that's going to change things a little bit for Banfield and Pataska. They are clearly not going to do this 1-stop in the second race. And that might put a little bit more pressure on Campbell. But yeah, it totally came down to really about, 15 to 20 minutes of time for what is essentially a 2-hour event, being very, very critical. And some drivers nailed it, and some drivers didn't. And some drivers who partially nailed it then didn't, you know, they didn't complete, like Brazier. And he actually put a pretty robust pass on Pete Herron into the last corner. That's how he got by him. So he still looks pretty mad. Obviously, the second race is going to be an opportunity for him to recover a bit more, but the same rules apply. You've got to get through the race start, lap 1, and then see where you are and figure out how you're gonna progress from there. And if you don't survive that initial portion of the race, to be honest, everything else is pretty much irrelevant.
I'd also like to just put in as well, for those drivers who have gone for a one-stop strategy today, they have looked pretty foolish out there with the fact that the best runner who was there with Sean Campbell is still only 33 seconds behind the leader. So it's been rather huge so far in terms of how this race has gone by that comparison. And I think a lot of drivers now are absolutely going to have to commit to a no-stop in that second race. And I don't think there would be A, planning for that, and B, I think that they are going to be more likely to be in trouble, tyre and fuel-wise, because they have to.
Coming up to the white flag, this time by in race 1 for the Sandown 240. After what's been a tame one, but an intriguing one strategy-wise, Campbell has a 17-second advantage for the white flag final time around here at Oran Park. Manerwich with big trouble from 7th position. He was amongst those drivers doing so well before this incident. He's now following down the pylon, was amongst one of the first who had hit before that incident. All while Campbell, he's about half a lap away from victory.
Yeah, Melnitz went for a pretty big send there, and it really didn't work out for him. He's going to retain a spot in the top 10, but lost a couple of spots.
Meanwhile for Campbell, very clean, very quick, but also very smart. Pushed the leaders behind him, was able to save fuel as the lead car for most of the race, and now, even with the drift, with being his biggest mistake this run, he'll be ready to celebrate his first victory of the season for RSR Esport. Out of the final corner, Sean Campbell wins race 1 of the Sandown 240 at Oran Park.
That is just simply dominant. The way that he drove that, he knew the strategy he needed to win this, and look at the margin he gets over Chris Barrett, who is definitely no slouch. This is probably the strongest team out here. They will have a 2-3-4 coming out of this race here, this race 1, which is huge for them going into race 2. But what does it mean for them right now? It means they've got work to do. They are 17, 19 seconds slower on the same strategy as Sean Campbell.
And in the second half of the race in particular, 8+ seconds or so gained by Campbell on raw pace alone. That's just incredible. That you have to figure out, what can you do, Christian, to fix that for the next run? Everyone completing their said runs right now. The last driver to complete a lap will be Trevor Bobrovsky. So everyone else has completed their races here to start off the first of 2 for the day.
Yeah, I think in terms of what can you do to close the gap, I don't really think there's much, if anything, if I'm totally honest. I think Campbell has really got, he's got it hooked up. He's got the raw pace for sure, and just the ability to, run that strategy. He's got it figured out. He's already done it once, and he's executed very, very well. As long as he gets a good race start here, I think it's going to be really, really difficult to beat him. That said, there was a couple of mistakes from the Apex Tech guys in the early couple of laps. We saw Conway, he ran wide, he lost a couple of spots. There's probably about 3 to 5 seconds there. So they can close it a little bit. I don't see them challenging Campbell for raw pace, if I'm completely honest, though.
With that, let's take a look at the unofficial race results after the first of 2 for the day, as Sean Campbell took the victory by 17 seconds over Chris Barrett. Conway finished in 3rd, despite damage, 19.7 seconds back. Then Hashimi rounded out the top 4, 22.2 seconds back. Ross Banfield had his cleanest race of the year in 5th. Pataska finished in 6th. Chalet finished in 7th after going off track at one point. Thomas Cope finished in 8th with his keep it clean and let drivers go if need be strategy. But Erwich finished in 9th. David H. Baker rounded out your top 10 today, Jake, for race 1.
And then line up in 11th, we had Trevor Bobrovsky. He wasn't able to crack the top 10, but a great result by him. Gabriel Roos, we saw have a couple of incidents as well. He comes home in 12th. Julian Jean with just 1 minute off the lead. A very tight battle with Joshua Wolf for that 13th spot. Miguel Freitas, we actually saw him be pretty impressive pace-wise towards the beginning of the race, but unfortunately fell away with a couple of mistakes. He was the last driver to finish on the lead lap in 15th. Ryan Walker, we saw have a couple of moments as well, comes home 1 lap down. Scott Brazier, though, has got to be the big talking point. He had the pole. We really thought he was going to contend for the race win, and immediately went off at turn 1, piled it into the barriers, lost a ton of time, went to the tail end of the field, but then had the same thing happen later on in the race. So he's going to be looking for a recovery in the second one after finishing 17th. Pete Harrod, he looked like he was struggling a little bit, but he was involved in some battles. Hopefully he can have a better second race here and kind of improve on that 18th place finish. Jens Homan and Ryan Wasilewski, I think he's going to be pretty furious about what happened in that first race. Unfortunately for him, he comes home 20th.
21st spot goes the way to Cordell Cologne. Then it's Chris Barrett rounding out 22nd. Rounding out the drivers, Shirley officially in 23rd on the board. It appears now, or rather I'm reading towards the opposite direction. Henderson, Redford, Benello, Facciaponti, Cologne rounding out the drivers. It's important to make sure you look to your left instead of your right at times. But that will take a quick break. You're watching GSRC for coverage of the Major Series in its European Pro Split.
iRacing is a sim racing game that combines a true-to-life racing experience with an online community of virtual racers from all around the globe. iRacing offers a multitude of officially licensed cars and tracks, laser scanned with millimeter accuracy. Their car models and mechanical systems are based on real-world physics, engineered in cooperation with manufacturers and race teams. Their skill license system ranges from rookie to pro, ensuring members are always pitted against those with similar skill sets. Members are able to sign up for a weekly race series, compete in time trials, host a private race with friends, and participate in racing leagues created and run by the community. With over 170,000 members, iRacing works in partnership with renowned motorsports organizations like NASCAR to deliver virtual races based on the real-life NASCAR Cup Series, as well as many other series on the NASCAR ladder. iRacing also features team racing, providing a variety of options for members to create and manage their own teams. Race with friends or real-world teammates in full-length endurance events like the 24 Hours of Daytona, Spa 24, or the Bathurst 12-Hour. Additional partners include IMSA, World of Outlaws, Supercars, and IndyCar, allowing members to race in their very own Indianapolis 500, Bathurst 1000, Chili Bowl, and many more iconic events. This is iRacing, delivering the most authentic racing experience short of getting into a real race car. Sign up today at iRacing.com.
Welcome back once again to GSRC's coverage of the Major Series in the European Pro Split for the Sandown 240 here at Oran Park. I'd like to take time to remind you that this series is sponsored by The Majors Garage, home of free Baseline Plus setups. Get help from any of the garage coaches 24/7. Sign up now for awesome, affordable monthly subscriptions, telemetry, coaching, and more at majorsgarage.com, or use the special discount code MajorsGSRC for 10% off. We have a link in the description below that directly applies to their special offer. Warm-ups now underway after an intriguing run. We'll take the time to speak with one of the drivers who finished off well in that one. Jamie Conway had some adventurous moments. Jamie Conway has found his way through an adventure to the broadcast booth. Jamie, you gone with the no-stop strategy. How was it from your perspective to try and make sure you got to the end on gas?
Yeah, thanks very much for having us, Justin. It's great to be back on with you guys at GSRC. Yeah, well, what a fun race. Great combo. Absolutely love it here. There's some insanely quick guys. I mean, all credit to Sean. His pace is just off the chart. But yeah, in terms of the strategy, we obviously got it right for race one. Not sure what we're going to do in race two. Not sure if it'll be as strong in the hotter temperatures. But yeah, we made it work. There's obviously a lot of fuel saving required, but yeah, really pleased to get second, third, and fourth for the team. Brilliant result.
So ask this, we've seen the pace from Campbell in particular. He built up an increasing buffer in the second half of the race on your team's cars. What do you guys plan to look at it? If you can make adjustments now for the hotter temperatures for the second race of the day here, knowing you will have track position, well, for the most part.
Yeah, it's hard to say really. I mean, we've worked on the car for this weekend, trying to get closer to Sean and Dallas and Ross as well, super quick in pre-quali. Chris and I were running Ivory yesterday. We got a podium in the prototypes yesterday, so we've been a bit stretched with our schedule this week. But hopefully, with the track position, like you say, we might be able to get a jump at the start. I had a good start in race 1, so just sort of fingers crossed really that we can mess up his race from the off. Really, I think that's our only chance because the pace is just too quick. But we'll see how it goes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, just trying to get a jump off the line down into turn 1, yeah. Because track position is everything at this track. Passing is really, really difficult, you know, and the pace is really even at the front. So getting a pass in would be very difficult. So I think it'll all be about that run down into turn 1.
With that, though, anything else you'd like to add before we let you get back to your team before we go racing here in about 1 minute and 50 seconds?
Yeah, just if we don't speak to you later, huge thanks to the team. They've done a great job preparing the car this week. Apex Technologies as ever, and our new partners, ProSim Rig and Base Performance Simulators in the UK as well. Huge thanks to them and everybody else on the team. So, yeah, and the broadcasters ever, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the time.
Cheers.
Cheers indeed. That's Jamie Conway looking to give his team something to cheer for in race 2 if they can find a way to take the victory. After a third place run for him, a team high for the grouping was second. Real quickly, Jake, first things first, your opinions for race 2, because he referred to it, the hotter temperatures will be a talking point. 93 degrees Fahrenheit now is that track temperature. Air temp is also spiked on up by 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Look Celsius, that's +3 Celsius track temp and about +3 Celsius air temp.
The track's hotter, but I don't think it's that much hotter, and that seems weird to say, but it's just going to make that tyre life a little bit more tricky. It's going to be a bit more understeery through a couple of corners, and you are going to see those lap times just drop ever so slightly more. But here in Norellan, you know, we're talking about what do you need to do to go and win this race. I think the biggest talking point is going to be drivers who did a one-stop strategy in the first race are going to have to work out how to do a no-stop strategy at 10 minutes notice.
Your thoughts, Christian, what we're about to see here in about 20 seconds time when these drivers make their way to the starting grid?
I think we're going to see everybody move on to the no-stop strategy. I think you've got to. Everybody's seen that even the best who did the one-stop strategy is a 32-second loss. There's absolutely no way you can knowingly go into this race accepting that you're going to just lose 32 seconds before you've even started. So that's going to be the key, how people adapt to that, and also the race start. The race start is going to be critical in terms of track position, especially if we know that cars aren't going to pit.
With that, the drivers have wrapped up their final warm-up session for today to make sure all the cars are shaken down. Only 5 drivers took the time to put in a lap time. We'll see the starting grid on screen again. It is the same starting grid that ended up lining up for the checker flag for reference. So keep in mind, no changes there. So Jake, with Sean Campbell looking so dominant in race 1, what do you do in race 2 to try and get on by? It was talked about on the start you can do it, but it's not going to be easier said than done. As we've seen, someone nearly did that off the start. They set themselves off the racetrack the next corner.
3 teammates, second, third, and fourth. If you're ever going to coordinate to make it happen, you do it off the start. If not, it's going to be a long race where Sean Campbell's quicker than, I'd probably say, the next few cars behind him all the way back to 5th.
We're waiting for just one driver to make their way to the starting grid, and that driver is now there, so everyone is all set to go already from Oran Park. Race 2 of the Sandown 240 is all set to go. The Major Series European Pro Split is underway once again. And a good start for Campbell this time. A good launch as well from Chris Barrett. Barrett tries to dive inside, Campbell blocked him all the way to the inside of the racetrack. Forces 2x2 behind him with the teammates.
It's so pedestrian down into turn number 1 and 2. They're too wide pretty much through the middle. It's a much cleaner start than it was initially, and they're going to have that run to 3. Big block coming through in the fight, and that's going to be Banfield down the inside of Hashimi, but Hashimi's going to get drive off the exit here into 4, but it's 3 straight, 4 straight right-handers, holds it around the outside. Hashimi's got position, he's playing rear gunner, so Conway and Barrett can attack.
Dark Tempers, remember, involving Banfield and that Daytona race in regards to one of the incidents collecting the whole grouping for Apex Tech. That may be at the back of some of these drivers' minds here in the battle for 4th on forward. The top 3 have been able to break away a little bit of a distance now as a result of some of that scuffling. But at the end of the first lap, it's Campbell in the race lead, and a strong corner exit pulled away by a 1/2 tenth on that exit alone, Christian.
Yeah, Campbell got just about a good enough start to retain the lead there. Obviously, Apex Tech have done a good job to hold on to the other 3 spots in the top 4, but Banfield is looking very, very strong. He's making that pass right now on Hashimi.
Able to clear him by barely around Hashimi in his front nose, but that's lost him 1.1 seconds. Where did we see that story before? Similar gap to race 1 already from that type of a fight. Of note, Theo Chalet has been dropped all the way back to 14th position. He would drop to 13th at the end of the last lap. He's had a lot of drivers try and make moves, in part with some of the stack-ups, in part because he would not been on the preferred line until now, really, for the corner, Jake.
Yeah, and this is the thing. This is a freight train circuit. If you are not on the racing line, you are in trouble around here. Pete Harrod can tell you that absolutely at this point, as he puts Travis Henderson on the wrong side of the line, and he suddenly loses about 0.4 of a second going through the Foster's curve. So already you're starting to see drivers struggling. And I tell you someone who isn't, Scott Brazier. He's already gained 5 places off of the start, and he might have just found another here as he is side by side on the run with Miguel Freitas here, fighting for 10th place.
Freitas backs it up. Brazier able to clear on by, and what a send to the corner. Nearly locked it too much up. Still gains himself about 3 car lengths to the grouping of cars in front for Broski and Rudes. Just look at how much confidence he has in the brakes here, Jake. Just to the very edge of locking it up and sending it off into the grass for a 3rd time. Let's not jinx it yet.
He's absolutely pushing, and just in front, David Melnarovic is pushing because it is checking up. You've got Hashimi, who's defending well, and Pataska, remember, who is the reigning champion, trying to bring himself into contention this season after a slow start, gets chalked up underneath. Nothing he could do there against Melnarovic, who just used all of his car to perfection there, and that has pretty much hurt the run for Pataska, who knows that he's got the pace to be even with Sean Campbell, that he's just got to find that ability to go out there to drive and to beat at his very best. What is going to be very telling as well is drivers who maybe potentially didn't start on a full tank of fuel, knowing they were going to 1 stop last time out, and how they will react with a car that's going to be incredibly heavy today with a full tank underneath.
And that's going to be the big headliner part possibly with that. As one driver's off, it's an Apex Tech car. It's Hashimi from 5th position. And his Ford got a little bit of help because the door was left open and someone decided, you know what? It's time to jump on through from about 20 feet away and see if it works. The driver you've seen in that side-by-side was one of those cars involved in Mount Airwich, by the way.
That's not his fault, though. That is not his fault. You leave that door open in a touring car around a track where it's so tough to pass, I'd do it. Christian, I'm pretty sure you would as well if you saw the door open.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of take it. We'll just have to see what it was like on the replay. But he got turfed off pretty good in the next corner. I mean, it is from far back. It was open. I feel like if he'd have pulled it up a bit sooner, he'd have got away with that, and both cars would have continued on. But obviously for Hashimi, that's pretty disastrous. But Melnitz didn't get away with that, because in the next turn, Pataska really, really laid heavily on his door, pushed him way out wide, and Melnitz lost actually quite a few spots.
Yeah, the left rear in particular is sending him in for repairs. You also seen that rejoin. You've seen the exact same thing, Jake. Just not the best of timing. Actually hit another one of those Majors garage back cars.
Yeah, the TFR cars effectively going to be looking a bit second-hand coming out of this event. Good news that they're probably not going to be run for the rest of the season. They've got a long time to go back to the garages and repair them. But what it does mean, though, is that it has completely opened up the middle of this field. Campbell now out to a 1.6 second plus 1.9 almost 1.8 second lead. You've got then the group of Barrett and Banfield who are second and third. Jamie Conway now in fourth position in this race, and Dallas Pataska, it's a long gap back to him in fifth. He's got a long road of 3 seconds to chase.
And the fuel save game is underway again. Of note for Sean Campbell, he has pulled away 1.8 seconds. But take a listen on board. Take a listen to the engine sounds. He is clutching on every harder braking zone. The medium corners, not so much. Listen from about here on. Letting it roll a little bit extra, I've noticed here, compared to the first half of the track in particular, Christian, where he really clutches it.
Yeah, and obviously he's practiced this a lot, and in the first race used it to great effect. So no real surprise to see that he's pretty much looking like this is kind of standard deal for him, you know, in driving the car. It doesn't look like it's throwing him off or anything like that.
Here's the clutch section. See the first part?
Yeah,
it looks like it's
really
actually
the point.
Yeah.
Where you will save the most is obviously at the end of that straightaway. And you're not really under threat there either. Obviously, he's got a pretty big lead already over Barrett. Bamfield's looking strong, though, in that third spot. If he can clear Barrett quickly, which I know we've said is obviously takes quite a bit of time and costs you normally around about a second to a second and a half. So he's at best, he's probably going to be around about 3 to 4 seconds behind Campbell if he gets into the second spot. But we'll have to see if he can run him down, and then even more so actually save the fuel required to get to the end of the race.
If anyone can, though, right now, it's Scott Brazier. I just want to point this out. He's got a huge pack in the middle, and it's the fact that he is 0.6 of a second quicker than anyone else. I think you've just spotted it, Christian.
Yeah, Brazier is looking very, very quick. He's up in that 6th spot already, which is, you know, really impressive considering that he started back in 17th. We did have a little bit of a pinball machine there. It was sort of situated around a couple of satellite cars and Joshua Wolf. They were all just getting tangled up with each other. I was amazed that we didn't see a car go around, but great job to everybody involved with that.
I'll be honest, at first glance, I thought that car that was at the other side of the bridge was one of the cars going around. But Thomas Cope, in particular, was able to hold on to it side by side in a one-lane corner. A lot of locking and tire smoke in this respective pack. That is in the middle of that freight train that's led by Bobrovsky you just seen. And a lot of smoke screens being kicked up here.
Well, this is a car that is so difficult, Justin, to get it turned in, and you are having to use the brakes as you go, and a lot of trail braking in this car. It's something that often doesn't really get talked about, is how much you have to trail brake, how much you have to really work on putting that application of both throttle and brake to get the car to move around the way that you would maybe like it to. I've seen so many great sim racers from Australia jump into a car, the likes of Brody Kostecki, for example, Anton Di Pasquale, who raced out in the Supercar Series and do well, Shane Van Gisbergen, a huge driver out there, reigning champion, loves iRacing, has been part of the scene and community, actually runs his own GT3 league out there called Apex Hunters in iRacing. And, you know, you see how the Australian community's jumped in. You know, it's the sort of thing where all of the drivers were looking at what they were doing with supercars and the E-Series that were going around. Originally, they'd had it out there on Forza, and they went, nah, this is just the gimmick on Forza. Bring it to iRacing where the really strong drivers are, and that's what they did.
And it's pretty clear with, as well, the amount of tracks Australian-wise that are coming to the service, Christian, that gap is now starting to be filled after, how do I phrase this politely? A little bit lacking past few years before that mark, Christian. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure I could really answer that the way that you would like that, JP. But yeah, I mean, obviously we got some new new stuff out recently with Winton, supercars on AI and things like that. And yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good point that the drivers that we've seen in kind of V8 Scops, as it was for a long time, and you know, especially when the Road World Championship stuff moved to the Porsche 911, the drivers that we saw were strongest were typically the drivers that had come out of V8s. We always saw Josh Rogers was exceptionally strong, and you know, those drivers have continued to kind of show that. Really, even it's been quite some time since that series moved over now. And yeah, I think it's totally fair to say that there's very, very strong drivers from kind of the Oz and NZ community, and they are definitely some of the best road course racers. I mean, they're very good on ovals as well, but I think road course wise, in difficult cars such as the V8, such as the 911 Cup, they really are the best. They are exceptionally difficult to beat, and they've got really, really impressive car control. So obviously they're kind of coming out from what is essentially a little bit of a niche sort of market, you know. V8 Supers was obviously known very, very well across the world, but the timing makes it very difficult for anybody outside of that region to watch it. And obviously it makes it difficult for those drivers to compete with European and American series as well. So that I think is why it's a little bit less known than, say, the European style of touring car races, but the driving quality is absolutely exceptional. I mean, you look at Scott McLaughlin, goes over to IndyCar. Okay, first season wasn't particularly amazing. Season 2 wins first race. So yeah, they're very, very good drivers, both in real life and on the set.
Oh, Wolf looking to try and get back going. He's now losing spots after going off the track. You've seen that a bit, Jake. Just looked like a similar situation from one of the earlier incidents of note with that same section. You clip the grass, you go bye-bye.
Well, here's the issue that you have with that section of track. You get a lot of drivers trying to be aggressive and take as much as they can out of it. You got a little miniature strip of asphalt there on the left-hand side, which you always look at trying to be aggressive and use that as your marker. But Josh Wolf just pushing it half a tire too much. And when you've got a car that is very tendent to oversteer and you grab a bit of grass, you are not saving the car when you put it out on that section of road. As we see now up into second, Ross Banfield has made the move, but look how much time it's cost him. It's cost him about 3 seconds to get that done into turn number 2, and it took him about 5 or 6 laps to really set that up and play that tactical chess at 250 Ks. Only 250 Ks around here, but one of the things that makes these V8s so beautiful to drive, Justin, is the fact that you take it to a place like Mount Panorama, they are reaching Formula 1 speeds as they make the run towards the chase.
And there's a reason, too, where you mentioned the time slots, of course, Christian, but when you think about the racing, a lot of drivers and as well, a lot of people on social media have seen in the past, in particular from the NASCAR side, comes to mind, loves this style of racing, the bumping and baiting that can come into play when it's on a straight circuit, as well as how it runs in general. As you see the dive bomb going on behind, Scott is here trying to move ahead side by side. This bumping and baiting sort of style, like this corner and this slipping and sliding, is what fans love to see.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I think that's kind of down to a car design that's inherently difficult to drive. You know, it's a car with a spool diff. It's not, at least this version of the car back in 2014 wasn't really making that much downforce. Tire grip it's okay. It's not amazing, you know, it's not incredibly wide tires or anything like that. It's not a single seater, it's a heavy car, and it punishes mistakes. And I think that's why people like the racing in series such as this, because you think with GTs and whatnot, they're very capable cars, but they've got assists like ABS, traction control and whatnot, and it means that the prevalence of mistakes is just so much less. Whereas in a car such as the V8 Super, or even say the NASCAR Cup Series car on a road course, the car is not really having a fun time on its own, just trying to make its way around the circuit. So it's easy to make mistakes, it's easy to create passing opportunities, and obviously driver skill is massively on display, because it's all about consistency, and it's all about pushing as much as you can up to those limits without overstepping them, because the penalty for overstepping them is just so severe.
Speaking of overstepping, Travis Henderson apparently has stepped into the nether and has popped back from the nether into a side-by-side battle and giving Handsome Pete a heart attack a bit. I'm joking, of course, unfortunately. What I mean specifically is, when you have a technical issue in a side-by-side battle, it is not a good seat situation. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's Schrodinger's car. It is both nowhere and everywhere at the same time, and you will panic in that position when you're looking around. Okay, are you still going to be holding your line? You have to trust your judgment that the cars around you are still going to be there by the time that they appear back. And if they don't appear back by the time you've gone through a corner, you just take that line and say, oh, bye forever, and that's a free place, and the unfortunates of online racing. But I think for Pete Harrod, you know, he's put himself in a position. He did well. He stayed behind for the moment. The one thing you don't want, though, when it comes to a race like this, it's more prevalent on ovals, but I think it has as much of a telling factor here at Oran Park, is you don't want to be stuck behind someone who's got those issues, because it's not just the fact you're stuck behind someone, it's the fact that when they blink, the car's not there, you actually lose the draft.
That's actually a great point to think about, and it really could hamper things in terms of the speed, but also just that ability to save that gas, but also just in general. If you're someone with a technical issue, Christian, on the iRacing service, the trend usually is, please move, please. And usually we've seen the results when you don't move, in a lot of cases go bad.
Yeah, obviously it's a real big factor, especially in something that's very pack racy. So, say Daytona, that's pretty much the worst case scenario to have a connection issue. Obviously, you can't be relied upon to draft with people, and the pack is very tight. So it's kind of at its worst in situations like that. But then also here, for example, with everybody in these long lines, if the car at the head of the train disappears, yeah, what do? You kind of have no choice but to just keep driving and hope that they'll reappear pretty quickly in front of you. But the draft is worth mentioning, because we talked about how it's hard to pass, but it's also hard to break away, because you do pull people along with you. I noticed that last night in a practice session, that it's quite easy to follow people and just have them sort of, you know, pull you around the racetrack to a good time. And especially for drivers who weren't able to or hadn't practiced the no-stop strategy, being in the draft is pretty much a best case scenario for them, because they're able to save a little bit of fuel whilst they're not really losing any lap time.
Notice this too as well, a lot more teammate coordination compared to race one. In the first race with qualified, a lot of them spread out, tried to sort each other out. Race two, partly because of the finishing order crossing over with the coincidental parts of the teammates together, but also just the flow of this race, a lot of groups upon groups that have at least two team cars working together, Jake.
Vavrovsky going for a slide at 4, and it's something we've seen quite a bit today. Drivers just getting a bit too greedy with the grass. It's happened again, same style of incident. 4 places lost because of it. But I think it's more than just the fact that drivers have just grouped and found each other. I think a lot of drivers have made some great places. Take Ryan Wasilewski, for example, there in the 14 at the front of this train. Started P20 here in this second race. He's up to 9th. He's flying.
Remember, he had all that trouble, though, in his respective run, including that contact with that situation involving the track blocker. So that is something he had been trying to recover from earlier. He's done a solid job recovering from that in race 2. Of note, we mentioned the issues with Travis Henderson and an issue on track where he looped himself just moments ago, clipping the grass. Here comes a peak. A little bit of teammate on teammate battling there for a second. Gabriel's just giving a peek.
It was just that, just a peak, and it's the sort of thing where if Wasilewski's the quicker driver, you got to make sure he stays ahead, mistake or otherwise, and this is the job that you have. And here on the rear, you just get a sense of how much you are really dealing with the bumps today. around Oran Park. It's like a miniature roller coaster. You never stop to breathe. You always have to be alert on what is going on around you, be it left, right, up, down, slant ways. Doesn't matter if you're in a great glass elevator or not. You go down the hill, you take this final corner. So easy to find the barriers off of it as you drive off of the exit and get that run onto that front stretch once again. And really what you get in terms of understanding what makes this track so special, what makes this track so important out there as one of the legacy circuits out there. Very few find themselves not here in the real world anymore. It's that this track is built to be tight and to be technical, and not many circuits anymore are built to be tight and technical. They are built to be expansive and flowing. This is, I would say, a grafter's circuit.
Just shows the changes in terms of the amount of land acquisition required for new tracks, first of all, when they are built, first of all, but also just showing where the demand can be for real-world development, with the need for space to, say, have those fan amenities, or have said space to be able to have this amount of battling, or this sort of run, or this sort of event that can be held, or these types of several events that can be all be factored in. There's so many different aspects that come into play now compared to when this facility opened all so many years ago in the real world before its closure in 2010. It's also worth noting, Christian, too, when it comes to this car, we haven't talked too much about setup itself. Setup in of itself, I just took a glance myself. For reference, I'm a stock car person, right? Nearly everything carries over from the stock cars currently to what you would put into a supercar, it looks like, or a V8 machine, I should say.
Yeah, that's pretty much true. I mean, there's quite a few options that you can change. You can change things like front and rear roll centers. You see another one of those Majors garage cars have a little bit of an off there.
That's with Roski again.
It's the same corner as well that he went.
Same incident again.
So, yeah, not a good second race for Vivrovsky here, but in terms of the garage, yeah, there's quite a lot you can do. You can obviously do all the kind of the regular things, cambers, caster, toe, anti-roll bars and springs and whatnot, but you can do some additional things like adjusting the bump rubber gaps, the roll centers like I've already mentioned. So there's quite a variety of ways to get lost, I think is the best way of putting it in terms of car setup. So it's not surprising to me that out of kind of the couple of setups I've seen for this event, people are sort of doing pretty different things, but all sort of achieving the same goals. And that's drive off the corner without kind of the car feeling like it's just rocking around through all these switchbacks. And it's a good point about the track as well, in the sense that most modern circuits are obviously bigger, but as we see a car off, in that this corner has really become kind of the talking point of the second race. We've seen most of the incidents in race 1 happen down at turn 2, but now it's right before the Yokohama Ridge in race 2. The circuit itself, yeah, so it was built at a time when cars weren't as quick as modern cars are, and I think that plays a lot of a part in it as well. You think there's a lot of racetrack here in terms of technical sectors, all packed into just about a minute's worth of lap time, and that's going to feel quite slow and kind of painful in most modern race cars, and I think that's probably why we've seen a bit of a trend away from it. But it does make it quite fun, especially in kind of the more classical cars. Even cars such as the Lotus 49 are actually a ton of fun around a track such as this.
I mean, if I can just jump in as well, this car and category has exactly the same philosophy as what NASCAR has, and that is that you drive this car on a Sunday and you sell this car on a Monday. It is that same philosophy that goes out, and it's the sort of philosophy where in the early 2010s, there or thereabouts, as Cordell Colon there on the left-hand side just let this entire group go through, is that this is why you had cars like Nissan jump in, Volvo for the earliest time came in, and again, sticking to the guns is Ross Banfield diving into the pits to make a stop. Justin, what do you do if you're Ross Banfield? You're committed to the one stop.
This is going to be very difficult, I think, because he was still within about 3.5 seconds to Sean Campbell. But the thing is, he and Julian Gian are the only two who have pit so far, compared to the pit party we've seen the last race where half the field pit around this time. Adrian Fasci-Ponzi's also coming into pit with the comfortability towards the back grouping, but you're not winning the race like that, Christian.
Yeah, I think that's a bad decision by Banfield. I really don't understand why he's doubled down on what was an inherently bad strategy. And that really doesn't make any sense to me. I could understand if it had gone the other way around. You know, he'd done the one stop in the first race and, well, the no stop in the first race, sorry, and felt like it hadn't worked and he was doing something different. But he's already seen that it loses him 32 seconds and he's doing it again, even though we've seen the majority of the field has diverged away from that strategy after seeing that it is an inherent disadvantage to try it. So, yeah, very confusing. I don't understand why he didn't make the switch.
The first sign of madness is doing the same thing over again, expecting to find a different result.
Very well said in this point. We'll see if it truly ends up being madness on that decision making. With just 4 drivers now who have taken that service. Of note, Chalet, he only came in for the faster pair early on, so he is the only driver who have a service. Actually, Ponzi had a lengthy stop. David H. Baker has just come in for his service, but from 21st position. Everyone else trying to find a way, some way, somehow, to hope Sean Campbell loses 4.7 seconds at the drop of a magic wand with 22 laps to go.
It's going to be tough because Sean Campbell's proven as in comes Scott Brazier actually to make a stop. We didn't quite see it, but a couple laps ago, Christian just found a massive dive bomb from Brazier trying to get past Pataska. And I've been looking at the way he's been driving right now, and he has been so twitchy every time he's come into the braking zones that I think he's been wearing out a lot of that car,
damage.
And he's had to.
He's had to take the fast repair, and Christian, I'm wondering, well, I think the damage is not so much from how he sent it, but look at the pit entry. Remember that discussion early race? Guess what? He hit.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how difficult it is. You see there just doing a full, almost Austin Powers into the pit entry, but managed to, I'm not going to say save it because he had contact with every wall in existence there, but, you know, it didn't at least really lose out much, able to take the fast repair. And that'll be him back out into the race. And I think for Brazier, maybe the one stop made a bit more sense because he was starting so far back and it's allowed him to be aggressive to move up. But he's still going to have to recover a lot of time. And we saw it was so difficult in that first race to do it. I still think in his situation, I would have still gone for the no stop. And just accepted that it was going to be a little bit more difficult for me to pass people. And we've seen towards the front of the field that it's really difficult to pass cars that are of similar pace to you. We've seen obviously Pataska, Conway and Barrett, and before he pit, Brazier were all in a line, just locked together, unable to really do anything against each other. And you know, like that's kind of where they were stuck.
I mean, I just want to point out as well that with that hit as well, Brazier is now 20 seconds back of that driver who just came in and made that stop, Ross Banfield. So in terms of what it's cost him, not being alert on the pits and having all of that effectively bring itself out together, he's dropped 22 seconds. And he's used his fast repair, so if he gets caught up in anything, his day may be done.
It's going to be intriguing to follow along with this. Thomas Cope we now see in the 7th spot. Get close to the wall once again. Of note, Gabriel Ruse, as said, did come into pit half a lap ago. Alice Pinello has also come in for pit service, but he's in 22nd. So for some, lots of space to work with, lots of bumpy and bouncy. But for others, lots of choo-choo training. Here with some of the team members thinking, oh, I can make it. Others, not so much right now. And that just, again, is partly down to the confidence and talent and experience, Christian, coming into play here. Of knowing how to save it. Save the gas.
Yeah, I do think that's a factor in why we've seen some drivers not go to the no-stop strategy. Obviously, the 10 minutes in between races was probably not enough time to kind of figure out a good strategy on how to save fuel. But it's surprising to me that we've seen even some of the faster drivers, they still stuck with it, when to me it just didn't really make any sense to do that, you know. I think really Banfield's strategy is the most confusing to me, because to him it would have been the clearest to know it didn't work. You know, like everybody else was kind of in their own race, and it was kind of up and down for people having mistakes, and some pitting, some not. You know, it's kind of a jumbled picture. You weren't looking directly at the head of the field. But I think for Banfield, he must have been. He was in the lead battle before he pit, and then he finished over 30 seconds behind. Like it doesn't really become any more clearer that the strategy was the wrong decision. So it's just very, very confusing to me that he's decided to stick with it. But obviously it is difficult to rapidly adapt with only 10 minutes between races. So I can understand that there's an element of risk in moving to something that you haven't practiced.
And my concern on that too is now, and why I think this is going to be the biggest thing, and this is a calculation depending on no tire wear existing, right? 1.6 seconds lap, faster lap. Times that by how many laps to go right now? 18 laps to go. He only gets within 5 seconds. Then you factor in the fall off. You're not getting within that 5 seconds. You might not get within 10 seconds of Campbell for the race win, in theory. And that's an if.
And in race one, didn't get within 30 seconds of the race victory. So say what needs to be. Yeah, good pass. Gets past Treva Favorowski, who has spent more time in this race sideways than forward. And that will be as plain as sailing as it comes. But you look at this race and you say, well, what are we supposed to do? Well, what are you supposed to do? You've got to hold on. And that is someone way off. How do you find yourself lost over there?
Well, it's called finding a way to Narnia, taking some cones with you and saying, thank you for letting me back into the real world, and off and away. Wonder if we can take a look to see what happened there. And you said it yourself before the race, some drivers may go to Narnia. Well, one did, although this one is paved.
I just look at it here, and well, here's the issue with trying to get yourself back going again around this place. There are so many dotted tire barriers on the infield of what is effectively the kart circuit that you are going to find yourself in a bit of trouble if you tap any one of them. He gets himself back sorted again and going. Does David H. Baker, leader of the Legends category. But that's what makes this track difficult, is that if you lose it anywhere in that infield, I've seen people get lost in there and never come back.
That's unfortunate in several different ways when you think about how that can happen. Race cars. 4.3 seconds back is this choo-choo train. On board with Jamie Conway. And I will say this, I've noticed this one thing when it comes to some of their paint schemes compared to some of the others. I'm not sure if this is to the intentional mark. You have all but one driver with this confetti pattern. You see those silver textures from the spec map. The leading car does not have that. Chris Barrett is the only driver, it seems, that I've seen in this grouping today who has decided, you know what, I don't feel like having some confetti on my car. I think.
Yeah, I'd say, and Christian, I don't know about you in terms of when you're running a team, what goes into livery design, but ultimately you get sort of phases and trends. You know, everyone had themselves the go faster stripe when they were younger, and it's like, oh, we'll put a red line in it, it'll go faster, it'll be great. And then you just sort of learn, well, okay, let's go with some experimental colors and all the rest of it. And then, of course, there was that time in the iRacing Formula One World Championship Grand Prix Series about 2011, where everyone decided our car has to be red, white, and black.
Yep. That wasn't just a thing in the Grand Prix Series. I remember back in the Coca-Cola Series on Oval, that was a thing there as well. Everybody wanted a red, white, and black car for some reason. It's definitely trends to it, you know, because I remember it was that, and then it went to people having blue cars, and you know, like it's funny because it starts off with presumably one person being like, hey, I don't want to follow what everybody else is doing, I want to do something different, and then everybody looks at it and is like, wow, that's cool, I want that too, and all of a sudden everybody's back running the same paint scheme, or, well, not the same, but, you know, similar kind of variation on a scheme.
No, that was actually a pass for fifth there we just saw on screen. That was Freitas off the road, allowing Wasilewski through.
Some mistakes starting to build up, absolutely. Wasilewski already 3 seconds up from Miguel Freitas with that mistake you've seen there. That was involving another lockup into Coca-Cola corner. And no, that sand does not give away free Coca-Colas for the drivers for their cup holders in the machines. They also don't install the cup holders for free. Looking back at that pack, meanwhile, these drivers looking nice, cool, and refreshed, it seems.
Certainly, this has just been a case of them sitting and waiting, and you know that Jamie Conway's not going to go and attack Chris Barrett. They're teammates, they do have the license to fight, but around here, if you're not alongside, you don't have a chance to make it happen. This is all down to Dallas Pataska, really, and how that 23 wants to go out there and attack. But I'd say at exactly the same point, I think Pataska's driving to a number. I think he's just going to be happy just to sit on the back and then go out and attack the second half, even the final half of this race. In the final 5 laps, I reckon he goes out there and tries something.
Meanwhile, we're mentioned having a paved Narnia. Guess who found the grass-filled Narnia? Travis Henderson spun just moments ago off of turn 11, coming out of the O'Brien Aluminum dog leg. And it's been a rough one, to say the least, for the 24 car, because he went off by about half a mile? Is it safe to say? Into the grass, if we can take a quick glance. When you are as far as Travis Henderson was into the grass, all you can say is, please save me from Narnia.
Oh,
Big exit stage left there.
you know, you get that kick as you go off the circuit, that jump. That's the scary part. The scarier part is driving into a field of absolutely nothing and then having to resituate yourself.
And by the way, the race leader was nearby that. He was the last car to pass before he rejoined, so that could have been very rough. Of note, Travis Henderson is not making friends now right behind the leader because Julian John tried to make a pass to the inside in Ricardo corner and had this check up and slam the brakes. There's some of the frustration there with the leader. Close call.
Well, they have a right to battle. They are side by side, and Henderson then will lose the place to Gion. Henderson will immediately then get out of the way of those drivers who are in second, third, and fourth. Barrett on the radio to say thank you very much for letting me through. But this is going to be tough for Campbell. He knew he had to get through. It's cost him about a second over the course of that stage, but they know they've still got to get past Gion, and that is going to be maybe a little bit easier now that the gaps have opened up. But at the same time, this is the sort of place where you're not going to get much of it, but it is still I need to get close enough to make that pass, and it's not an easy place to get close and to make passes and to feel happy and comfortable with the way that you're driving. Sean Campbell, effectively, it's the ebbs and flows of racing. You'll lose a bit of time and you'll gain a bit later.
Part of that comes again with the experience, but also with the equipment you may have, with your seating setup, what room you're in, what surrounds you in said room. Not gonna lie, getting the feeling of that can be absolutely critical. It could be the difference between tenths of a second, hundreds of seconds, 1,000th of a second. We've seen on the pace. And keep in mind, this is going to be very much differing compared to the next round out, Christian, because next time out, it's short track racing at Legacy Phoenix, but in the Lotus 79s.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty different, that's for sure. I mean, we've had pretty good races at Legacy Phoenix in the past. I remember we ran the Silver Crown there before, and that was, you know, it was actually very, very good. It was a lot of fun. I'm hoping that the 79 is going to produce a similar kind of racing, but it's obviously got a bit more downforce and whatnot, so well, it actually has some downforce as opposed to Silver Crown. So, you know, there's that, which helps a lot. I feel like... Sorry, Jake.
Sorry, didn't Lionheart run a Lotus 79 leagues on ovals?
They still do. They still do run the Retro Series, and Phoenix is one of their usual stops, where dirty air has been a huge factor in each of those races in fixed competition, Jake.
I'd say then we've got a very nice baseline set for it, and knowing Mike Ouliette and the team, of course, over at what's going on, as you can see, it is Jens Homan trying to get past Ryan Walker. You've got Josh Wolf, you've got Ross Banfield here in this train, fighting for 3 spots of 4 in the top 10. I'd say that, you know, they do a lot of work out there, trialing and testing ideas. Oh, you can't get much closer than that through into 2. Oh, lordy, that's going to be a close one if they actually start fighting.
Ross Banfield is fighting because, remember, he already has made the stop as Wolf has to cradle the curb there to hold on to it, move Banfield back inside the top 10. A little bit of testing on if those are good decisions to make passes or not. Some of them nearly failed that test in spectacular fashion. Others pass it. Meanwhile, up the road, things continue to get dicey. But I will say this. When it comes to the Lotus 79, they're also in the past few builds or so. There was an update a while back around the start of the fall in particular, Christian, which impacted the tire fall off. Because before, in the past, you go to it over in the Lotus 79, you're just taking fuel only. You take the tires, it actually makes it worse in the past. Now, tire fall off is a more critical on the ovals in that car.
Yeah, so there's going to be some more strategy to it than maybe there would have been in the past. And to be honest, that was true quite some time ago on road courses. I remember back when the majors ran a Lotus 79 race at Silverstone. It was the old historic Silverstone at the time. And there we were pitting not because we needed tires, but we were pitting because we would run the race on light fuel. And we figured out it was actually quicker to make a pit stop and, you know, have the lighter car for kind of both, well, the first half of the race really, because the second half you're equivalent. But yeah, so that was a fuel strategy race there, obviously with a little bit more tire fall off on ovals now and on road courses too. It's moved away from just being a fuel strategy kind of deal, but I think when it comes to the 79 on ovals, it's going to be interesting because it's obviously quite a quick car actually, considering the track, you know, and I think it'll be a good race. We've seen in the past where kind of these more sort of out there combinations actually put on a really good show.
When they say it's out there, it's put on great racing in the past, as Ross Banfield made a great pass to the inside there with some given space from Holman. He's now up to 9th. Not going to be the conversation for the win, obviously. 31 seconds back right now with the race leaders, but could get as high as 6th, which would put him -5 if he was in turn instead trying to stretch it on the no stop, if he was able to do so. Sean Campbell's gap, though, is going down and fast all of a sudden, Jake. It was up to 4.5 seconds. It's now 3 seconds, so Campbell's gone into massive save mode all of a sudden.
I think it's more the fact that Barrett and Co. is the spinner just in front of them.
Oh, that's not going to help.
Redford, who's gone around. That will be a little bit cause for concern going around. I think the key here is that the team of Barrett and Conway, they've got a car that comes to light when the tyres are dead. And it's not the same for Sean Campbell. I saw it at the back end of the race in race 1, that it looked very similar. And I think if Barrett can continue on this trend, he may give Sean Campbell a few nightmares and heebie-jeebies in the back.
And the difference was between race 1 and race 2, right, was there was a buffer by the time you would have seen that point, Jake, of around, what, 16, 17 seconds? That buffer's not here this time.
No, absolutely, and I think that it's been a great driving from Barrett and Conway to get themselves in the rhythm, to keep this race pretty much situated. And I think they used the first 5 to 6 laps really well in this race, holding on to the front of the field and giving themselves an opportunity to say, You know, you're not going to break out 4 or 5 seconds early and we're going to fall back. We're going to stay in that draft and we're going to make that process a lot longer. And when our tires are a lot better than your tires are, we can go out, we can be aggressive, we can get through, and we can jump forward. As having to fight side by side with the traffic is not what you want to be planning up over Yokohama Bridge.
Mark Redford not picking the right line to let traffic go there just cost the whole group 0.7 of a second. Now Jamie Conway nearly hits him. Started on by close call with Pataska. And just like that, all the time they picked up the past 3 or 4 laps just got lit on fire. That's frustrating, Christian.
Yeah, it is, especially obviously with only 5 laps to go. And I am impressed with the Apex Tech guys and how they've kind of really closed the gap a lot more than I thought they honestly would do. You know, they had the same strategy last race, and they were quite significantly behind Sean Campbell, whereas this race, they've executed that earlier portion of the race much better, as Jake said, and that's kept them... They've not been threatening, so to speak, but, you know, they've been there. If there's a mistake from Campbell, it's going to lose him the race, and I don't think that was true in the first race. He could have had a pretty major off, and he would have been okay. He would have had time to recover and still win. But in this one, if he makes a mistake that sends him out into the dirt just for one corner, you know, he just gets it a little bit too deep into turn 2, it's going to lose him the lead.
Now coming down, 4 to go this time by at the stripe. 3.9 seconds, nearly 4 seconds identical now. To be able to try and close things out was 1/10 and a half quicker nearly last time by. And the major thing too that's going to play into Campbell's benefit, no traffic in front of him. Barrett, Conway, Pataska, they've got traffic, still at least 1 car between them and the race leader.
And the other thing here is that Pataska started to line up attempts at passes. He got really close to the back of Jamie Conway on that last lap as we go on board here with Conway riding through up over the bridge. And this is such a tough place because you reach that crest, you have to lightly brake, and it's so easy for the back to step out if you just ever so slightly miss your marker. And then going through this section of road, this is one of, here, Justin, only 2 figure 8 circuits out on track. And speaking of red, white, and black liveries, there's one in the tires.
And our driver with some struggles, that's Wasilewski.
That's Walker.
Walker rather, yes. One of the W's for the team going backwards. Walker to 14th.
He just outbroke himself. It's as simple as that. You think you've hit the right marker. You think you've done it correctly. You miss it by 5 meters. Christian, you've been driving this car out to practice. How diligent and I would say regimented have you needed to be on the brakes trying to understand this car?
That was Pataska on the brakes in that situation. Christian, this falls into the point you're about to answer. Nearly hit the back end of the race tech drivers under braking, and he's lost the draft nearly.
Yeah, you got to be really disciplined. Obviously, Pataska is now at the point in the race where he's kind of got to push and try and see if he can get these 2 spots that are available to him ahead. And yeah, it's one of those cars where the more you push it, the kind of worse you can sort of make life for yourself. You know, if you miss the braking zone in one corner, if you don't then kind of like immediately back it up and get yourself resituated, it's just going to continue, and you can kind of ruin an entire lap by just being actually too aggressive, especially with the braking zones, because it's a car that rewards being very smooth, which is kind of counter to the idea of trying to, you know, press on and make some passes and whatnot. So it's definitely difficult because the way sometimes to go faster is to actually back it up a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you have the right setup, then you really find that helps too. Indeed, too. And then you add that factor in to the recipe. Boom. You pull away and you don't light up your tires and turn them into balloons. Sean Campbell, meanwhile, looking to have a party up in front, has grown the gap to 4.5 seconds, gaining 1/10 and a half per lap the past couple. Not much ground has been gained by second on back, meanwhile, to even the lap car. So for Sean Campbell, the white flag coming up this time by Similar response from race 1, leading just about the whole way here, dominating run, 1 lap to go, Jake.
Absolutely, and Sean Campbell has just proven that he is probably the greatest driver in this field when it comes to pure racecraft. You need pure racecraft to drive this car. You need balance with your car, with your steering wheel, with every single feeling and emotion that you get out of every bump and every area of this circuit. And he's just proven today that nobody around him has been able to get anywhere close, has been able to match his pace, and it's shown by multiple second victories here in both races, knock on wood, as he goes through the second half of this track. He's just driven a consummately professional race, has never looked like he's been any trouble in the 7, and at the end of all of this, I think it's safe to say Sean Campbell now probably is new favourite for this championship.
He had some roller coaster moments early on in this campaign, but for today, he has been the man to beat. Sean Campbell drifts off the final corner. He sweeps the races for the Sandown 240 in the Major Series in its European region Pro Split. Barrett and Conway round out the top 3. Pataska finishes off the podium in 4th spot. Not the day the defending champion wanted to have go his direction, Christian, as a couple drivers in the last lap have had some spins.
Yeah, it didn't look like Pataska was actually out of fuel on that last lap.
Hearing that confirmation indeed as well, a couple others might be at risk of that. Jens Holman, who had a spin and was trying the no stop, he's not been able to finish the race either now after some of his attrition and problems. But for some of the others, such as Scott Brazier, it's going to be the question of what if. In terms of what if I didn't make that mistake on the opening lap of race 1, what could have been for the Simsa car? 13th instead is the finish. Monerwich, the last finisher.
Yeah, it's disappointing for Scott Brazier. He's so good. He is such a great driver. His legacy in terms of how quick he is through GT3s, which is a very competitive category. He's always in and around top split, second split, and giving himself opportunities to go out there and race. He is incredibly quick. He is incredibly diverse. But, you know, today, not his car, but there will be other chances out there over the course of a season.
So that wraps up race number 2 of the day. And that closes out said round with that. Take a quick step aside. Stick around. Post-race coverage is coming up right after this. You're watching the Global Sim Racing channel for coverage of the Major Series and its European region in the Pro Split.
This is iRacing, the world's premier online racing game. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat to experience today's newest form of competitive motorsport, virtual racing, all from your home PC. Race virtually in endorsed series from NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, the World of Outlaws, Aussie Supercars and more. Take on legendary circuits like Daytona, Silverstone and the Nürburgring. Join iRacing's global online racing community and get on track today at iRacing.com.
Welcome back to Oran Park for post-race coverage for the Sandown 240 for the Major Series and its European region, the Pro Split, here from Australia. It was the type of round where if you had experience, that experience helped those drivers power on forward. Sean Campbell showed he's got the talent on the road courses and the fuel-saving strategy to be able to run away. Once again, sweeps the round today. 4.1 seconds the difference between him and Chris Barrett. Campbell had so much gas at the end of the race, he was able to do a couple burnouts and take the full cooldown lap at speed. Barrett finished in front of his teammate Jamie Conway. Dallas Pataska out of the podium this run in 4th. Washaleski with one of the drives of race 2 from 20th to 5th position in the end. With his strategy, he was 1 lap down in race 1. Ross Banfield did get back up to 6th as projected as a result of his one-stop call. However, could be a matter of what if, since he was the closest out of anybody before his call to Sean Campbell. Then it was Thomas Cope who stayed out with no pit stop. Miguel Freitas in 8th. Wolf and Hashimi round out the top 10J.
Yeah, and in 11th is the driver who started there, Treva Vavrovsky, who spent a lot of time sideways here today. Handsome Pete, this has not been the start to the season he's wanted, but again, it's another consistent little finish in 12th place, and I think he'll just be looking at finding good finishes from now to the end of the season. Scott Brazier as well, 555, definitely had the pace today to go out there, challenge for victories, but ultimately it is 13th with David Melnarovic in 14th position in the 88 car. Gabriel Roos will be classified as the last finish on the leading lap in 15th. And a lot of drivers a lap down. Jens Hohmann, Julien Gion. You got the likes of Ryan G. Walker there, who had that unfortunate incident. Theo Schleret as well, just dropped backwards over the entirety of the race. Started 7th for that one. And Travis Henderson rounding out the top 20, Christian.
Yeah, Elvis Bonello, he ran around at kind of the tail end of the field for most of the day. Unfortunately, he rounds out 21st. Mark Redford, a driver we saw who had numerous incidents throughout the 2 races. Unfortunately for him, he was a lap down in 22nd. David H. Baker, probably the driver who suffered the worst in that second race. He started it in 10th after a good result in race 1, but unfortunately dropped all the way to 23rd with Adam Faciponte and Cordell Colon, a driver who we saw have some pretty big incidents in the first race. Didn't really get any better for him in the second one. He's 23 laps down and the last of our finishes today.
That's what we talked about at today's running order. Chris Barrett is standing by, second step on the podium to begin post-race discussions. And we spoke with Jamie Conway earlier. This time, Jake Sperry will have the chance to talk to Chris Barrett about his team's performance.
Well, Chris, it's back-to-back second places first and foremost, which will be incredibly positive for your team. But let's just talk about how difficult it was handling the Ford out there today. It looked like it was always going to be a tough car. The oversteer, the understeer, just every kind of steer that comes along in a machine that has that locked differential. So in terms of trying to get to grips and understand arguably the most difficult car to drive on the iRacing service, how was it for you?
Oh, well, thanks, guys. Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for the broadcast. It's excellent, as usual. In terms of driving the V8, well, I mean, it's just an amazing combo. One of the most difficult things that I've driven on the service, for sure, and it just requires intense concentration throughout the whole stint. I think we do a lot of driving in the LMP2 and endurance races, but this is a whole different ball game, especially on this track where a millimetre wide on the grass and you're probably out of the race. So it's a really fun one, really satisfying to get it right, but it can bite you at any moment. So I think the practice we put in for this race really showed today. We've been preparing quite a lot over the past few weeks together as a team. And I think the results 2, 3, 4 in the first race and then 2, 3 in the second race really show that. Bad luck to Hash in the second race. I think he got a bit unlucky. And also I'd just like to say thanks for Teo, who probably didn't get the results he deserved, but put in a lot of work and strategy and setup for the team. So thanks to him as well.
The work was there, the setup was there. You put yourself in a good position. It looked like a couple drivers had a game plan coming into mind, thinking that they could one-stop their way forward and make up the time later on in the race. But it just seemed like in these cooler conditions that the tyres weren't going to let go as much as maybe they would have done if the track was, it's going to be funny to say, typically Australian and hot. So would you say that you're happy today that the cooler conditions in comparison to what had normally been expected effectively put you in a much better position for your strategy to work today?
Extremely happy, to be honest. We did a lot of calculations and practice beforehand, and we thought it was going to be a lot closer between the two strategies than it was. It always tends to be once you get in the race and there's a bit of traffic and a bit of battling, you can save more fuel than you expect. But it's a big ask, really, kind of 10% fuel save over a flying lap. But I think, to be honest, the cooler conditions were good, but also hot conditions tend to make fuel savings a little bit easier because the pace is a bit slower in general. So swings and roundabouts, really. I just want to say to Sean, like, well done. Hats off to him. We thought in the first race that he was going to come in for the pit stop because he had so much pace, but turned out he was fuel saving all along. I think we caught up to him in the second race a little bit. Only 4 seconds at the end isn't too bad. But honestly, we didn't have the pace to match him. So fair play to him.
Well, the big thing for you in terms of a team is that you have the team's championship and you've got 2 drivers who are up there fighting for the title overall in these early stages, which is a real positive. So how do you take that positive of not only having the team's championship, yourself and Mr. Conway up there at the front fighting for the title here today, but also on top of that, you look at next time out and it's Phoenix in a Lotus 79, not your traditional combination, but how does it feel effectively going really classic IndyCar, really, really short, tough oval?
Yeah, looking forward to it, to be honest. A bit like we said before Daytona, we've just got to get our heads down and make it to the end of the race and see what happens. I think we proved at Daytona that as a team, we're really good at working together to kind of get the job done. I think, Jamie had an excellent race there. We've got good experience in the team. Like I said, Teo races a lot of the Lotus 79, so he's going to be helping us out a huge amount there. And really, we just need to get some laps under our belt. Looking forward to it, something a bit different, but we're definitely going to carry on taking the battle to Satellite and the rest there, but really proud of what the team's accomplished so far. And I think Jamie and I have, an excellent team first kind of relationship, and, the priority is to get this team championship wrapped up for Apex Technologies.
Priority is there, and the priority now is moving on to next week. So before we let you go here, Chris, shout out sponsors, anyone you'd like to thank.
Thank you. Yeah, just like to say thank you to all our sponsors. So, of course, Apex Technologies for the title sponsor of the team, and then Pro Simrig, Base Performance Simulators, Meridian Audio, TPI Cinema, Hippo Sports Management. And also, I'd like to say thank you to my girlfriend, Annabelle, for putting up with me sim racing all weekend. She's very kind. So thanks very much, guys. Appreciate the broadcast and all the best.
Always thank the girlfriend. You'll make your life much easier later. Chris Barrett there joining us. Second positions back-to-back, Justin.
Cheers.
A strong run there for the Apex Tech Machines. 2-3 in race 2. I'd like to thank both Conway and Barrett for taking the time to speak with us during today's coverage. Your final thoughts, first of all, Jake, on what we've seen here tonight, here at Oran Park, and what was, to put it pretty mildly, a race where Sean Campbell was able to harness the power of Nicolas Cage and use all his various characters to will his car to make it to the end on fuel, both races in dominating passion, and have enough fuel to celebrate still.
He mastered the car better than anyone else did. He understood the car fundamentally from the very beginning, and I think that he put on a show for everyone today by running away with 2 very good victories. It's going to be a case where you look at someone like that who's able to just get a car and get a face like that as he drives around, which will be more of a distraction for his opponents. When you look and you see Nicolas Cage in your mirrors, that's always going to be a little bit of a cause for concern. More so open wheel than closed wheel, which is next time out. I probably think that Sean Campbell is a title contender with this sort of performance. I don't think this is a one-off. I think he is out there, and I think he is the driver to be out there as we head ourselves over to the desert.
It's worth noting there is actually a Nicolas Cage movie where he plays all the characters of Nicolas Cage. Very fitting. Christian, your thoughts on the race?
Yeah, I think it's the same really as Jake's, that Sean Campbell really executed basically the whole way through. Qualifying was good. First laps were good, no mistakes. And basically dominated the races with a good strategy. He really didn't look under threat at all in the first race, and then the second race, I feel like he was under a little bit more pressure, but not really significant amounts. He didn't have a margin that he did in the first, but overall just a pretty dominating performance. We've seen that he can be fast, just hasn't really had the results so far. So yeah, I definitely think that he's going to be a contender in terms of overall points championship. But for teams, it's going to be really hard to beat the Apex Tech guys. They've pretty much got everybody beat right now. Strategy looks on point in all the races we've seen so far. They've nailed it every single time. they're scoring big. 2 drivers in the top 3 both times today, and one race where they had 3 in the top 5. It's going to be so hard to overcome that points deficit that's going to build up so fast in the team's championship. So, that's pretty much where I stand. Sean Campbell is looking very strong in Drivers Championship. Apex Tech for the teams.
Just got a quick message from Sean Campbell, who is not able to make it in time, unfortunately, for post-race coverage. Simple message. That was fun. He definitely had fun on the way to victory today. We'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's action from Oran Park. I'd like to thank the companies who provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed on screen. Additional thanks go to Judah Lawn, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to today's team and Jake, Christian, Zach, and Dougie. You can find out more about GSRC at theglobalsimracingchannel.com or through our social media listed at the bottom of your screen. Also, check out merchandise by going to the store at gsrc.storyandvy.com. We keep a link in the description of the YouTube version of these broadcasts below. Speaking of YouTube, subscribe to our channel as well as hit the notification bell so you don't miss a moment here on GSRC. As talked about during the racing coverage, the Jimmy Bryan 200 will be at Legacy Phoenix with the Lotus 79s. That will be April the 3rd. Be sure to tune in at that time. It is 5 p.m. scheduled qualifying and/or race start, London time. So, be sure to tune in for our coverage then. But don't forget the Americas region will be on the track at 8 p.m. Eastern time for their run here. And with everyone taking plenty of notes, to say the least, it's going to be interesting which drivers learned from today, which drivers wrote down every word Christian said to a T, and which drivers execute to win this run. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on screen, so be sure to check them out and mark them down your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.